If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, nighttime drivers, truckers, and other people who traverse forest roads and woods, please share any sightings involving cryptids, skinwalkers, wendigos, or other unknown creatures. It happened in southern Alberta, Canada. Me and two friends were driving along a rural road at night. I was in the passenger seat, and out of fucking nowhere, this huge white creature ran out of the ditch, and I'm still not sure how we didn't run it over. My friend, who was driving, saw it too and freaked out. My friend in the back seat was sleeping but obviously woke up to the commotion. This animal was huge. I bet it would be about 8 feet if it were standing on its back legs. It walked on all fours and had a similar body shape to a bear. We live in a somewhat rural area, so the back way is very dark, there is no traffic at that time of night, and the speed limit is 60 kilometers per hour. As we're driving along, we're about 5 minutes from home. Out of the corner of my eye towards the forest on the passenger side, I catch a glimpse of something moving fast. The moment my foot hits the brake, my wife's hand grabs my leg. We come to a screeching halt on the road, and whatever it was stopped dead in front of us. It cocked its head to look at us. We both at the same time said, "Do you see that?" It was huge. Best guess, it was 7 feet tall and had yellow eyes that glowed from the headlights. And it was muscular and skinny at the same time. The most memorable feature, though, were its legs. It 100% looked like a dog walking upright with a cocked angle in its leg. No sooner did it stop and glare at us, did it continue to bolt across the road and vanish into the forest on my driver's side? The only way we have ever been able to describe it is werewolf-like. And like I said, my wife and I both agreed. If we had not both witnessed it, I'd have called myself crazy and never mentioned it. But we both saw it. I was on my way to go camping and had just crossed the Mackinac Bridge to get to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It was storming, and it just started pouring buckets of rain. While driving up a hill, my daughter and I saw a man standing in the middle of the road. There was not great visibility with the sheets of rain, but we both pointed out the man standing in the middle of the road, and we were worried he would get hit by a car. When he turned, it was not a man, it was a huge black dog. We both thought it was a man at first, and then it was a dog, and I can't explain it. It could have just been the combination of looking up from the bottom of a hill and the rain. I just think it is odd that my daughter and I both thought we saw a man. I stopped on one side of the road to help it, and so did a man on the other side in a truck. I love dogs and always stop to help when I see one in the road, but I hoped that someone else would be able to help it because my truck was stuffed with camping stuff and the only place it could go in my truck would be the front seat with my daughter and me. It was still in the middle of the road, looking back and forth between the man and me. Seeing it up close, I was a bit surprised to see how big it was. I also felt uneasy and intimidated by this animal. It looked almost like a black German shepherd, but also wolfish. I was a dog groomer, so I have been around a lot of big dogs, and this one was huge. If I had to guess what breed it was, I would say a wolf hybrid. The guy yelled over, asking if it was my dog, and I yelled back, "No." The man then yelled, "Here, boy," and patted his leg, and the dog ran off to him. Seeing that the dog was being taken care of, I got back in my truck and got back on the road towards our camping destination. My daughter was telling me how it looked like a person standing in the road, and then when it turned, it was a dog. It may not be paranormal, but it was definitely an interesting experience. On May 19, 2014, the man and his teenage daughter were driving on Route 201 towards West Newton on the evening of May 17, 2014, when something strange occurred. It was after 11 p.m., as they were driving down the rural road, that the father, who was driving the vehicle, caught a glimpse of something off to the right side of the road. At a distance of about 15 to 20 feet, the man saw what appeared to be a person crouched down on the roadside. It suddenly rose up from the ground and began to walk onto the roadway in the path of the vehicle. The driver had to swerve slightly into the left lane to avoid hitting the dark figure. His daughter responded at the same time, "Did you see that, Dad?" What they observed was a tall man-like creature that appeared to be covered in black fur from head to toe. As it crossed the road, they could see its arms swinging. No odd sounds or smells were reported during the observation. The feature that stood out to both observers was the glowing eyes of the creature. The man remembered that the glowing eyes were bright white with a bluish tint, while the daughter remembered they were more of a greenish color. The man watched the figure in the rear-view mirror as they continued down the road. The creature was standing in the roadway, looking toward the car. The driver said he could still see the glowing eyes of the creature, but they didn't appear to be as bright at that time. The father was curious and told his daughter he was going to turn around to try to see the creature again. His daughter was frightened by the experience and told him to keep going, saying that she didn't want to go back. On June 1, 2014, Eric Altman, director of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, and I were able to meet with the father and look over the location where the encounter had taken place. There had been a lot of rain in the area, and no tracks were found. The witness was credible, and Eric and I were familiar with the general area since there had been a history of other Bigfoot reports near there over the years. My father just got back from the Lake District, and he told me about this big cat he saw. He was driving through Penrith when he saw something black running in a field. My dad goes hunting and can distinguish a dog from a cow or a deer, and it fitted neither of these, as it had an elongated torso, much like that of a black panther. We looked online, and his description matches the sightings of the Beast of Cumbria. Anyone know if there has been anything confirmed about how the big cats got there, or have any logical explanation that my dad saw? I have been closely following the possible Bigfoot shooting story in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, since Wednesday. I know that Bigfoot exist and that they inhabit Somerset County, Pennsylvania. In late November of 1994, my wife and I were traveling from New Jersey west on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. We were on our way to Steubenville, Ohio, to stay with my wife's brother and his wife for Thanksgiving. At around 9:30 p.m., we were near the town of Somerset, Pennsylvania, so I decided to pull off the highway to stop and get gas. The station was near the exit, so I quickly filled the tank and headed back towards the turnpike. I was merging back onto the highway when my wife gasped. I saw it as well. My headlights had caught a glimpse of a huge, hairy creature walking onto the highway on my front right, north side of the westbound lane. I swerved to the left in order to avoid hitting it. There was another similar creature as well, just a few feet behind it. As I passed the creature, it must have reached out and slammed its hand on the trunk. We heard a loud thud. I looked back in the rear view mirror and noticed brake lights coming from the eastbound lane. I assume it was crossing the highway on the south side. I knew that it was definitely a Bigfoot, I had no doubt what it was. I continued to drive without stopping. Then I thought that I had better stop and make sure the tail light was not damaged. I didn't want a trooper stopping me with a broken tail light and then trying to tell him Bigfoot did it. But then again, if it was broken, what was I going to do that late at night? Anyway, I pulled onto the shoulder, grabbed my flashlight, and got out of the car. I walked back to the trunk and looked around. I then noticed a slight indentation on the rear passenger side quarter panel. I looked closer and noticed that there were scratch marks on the surface. I wondered if the Bigfoot had been holding something or that its fingernails had caused the scratches. I got back in the car and resumed driving. The Bigfoot was dark brown and had very long, rough hair. I didn't get a good look at the face since the hair almost seemed to cover most of it. My wife and I both estimated that this creature was at least 8 feet tall and had massively long arms and legs. We barely caught a glimpse at the other Bigfoot, but it seemed to be much smaller in height. I grew up on a farm near Monticello, New York. My brother and I had heard stories about a man-beast that lived in the vicinity of a nearby lake. We never believed these tales, until my brother had an encounter with a large, hairy man while camping with his friends in the Catskills. He never talked about the incident in detail, only that he was shocked by it. It's a shame because he never went into the woods again. I really didn't want to believe him, but I knew deep down that something significant had happened to him. So when I told him about our encounter, he just smiled and said, "I told you so." So I have a very strange story that still gives me the heebie-jeebies when I think about it. This was about 4 to 5 years ago, around Thanksgiving. I was a senior in high school, and at the time, I had a girlfriend that I frequently visited. She lived in the boonies, middle of nowhere, around a small town called Winona with a population of 162. Now, before I start, I will go ahead and say that this is very much in the middle of nowhere. This is courage and cowardly dog country. Except for a few hills and random forest clusters. Another thing to add is that there have been mutterings from locals about seeing some very strange things out there. Alright, here goes. So it was almost midnight, and my folks were pretty cool with me staying out as long as I said where I was and when I planned on being back. I had a 45-minute drive on a very quiet, lonely little highway back to my hometown. So I started off, and normally I drive a little over the speed limit, but not too dangerously. I was there, and that road just always creeped me out. I just always wanted to get the hell home. There's not much lunar light on this night, and the stars had pretty low visibility. So I know this was not some sort of odd celestial phenomenon. The road goes through this draw where water used to flow a long time ago. The road basically dips down and then backs up after a while. I go down it, and I'm listening to the talking head on my phone at pretty low volume. As I start to take the incline, a light shines on my car, but it's a sort of white-green, and it's not coming from in front of me like an oncoming car or from behind me, it's from directly above me. The incline steepens more, and I look right up at this bizarre light. I will try to describe it as best I can. There was a solid, ring-shaped, dull white light that appeared to be large enough to fit a Tahoe or something inside of it. In the center of this ring was a light that was shining directly on me, as if it were a spotlight. Its color was sort of a white-green. This whole enigmatic thing was maybe 50 feet above me. I got a look at it for what felt like 4 to 5 seconds until I said, "What the fuck is that?" Then this thing promptly took a sharp trajectory up, then sort of flashed away. I was so terrified that I drove about 110 miles per hour back home. I was in a Camaro, the rest of the way. I didn't sleep very much at all that night. I also swear on my mother's grave. I saw this same flying object a year later when I went to visit my best friend, who lived about 20 miles from civilization in the boonies. This time I was driving out to his house to hang out, drink some, and bullshit about college. It was around 9:30 p.m., and I had just made it out past the last houses I would see for a while until I reached my friend's. Anyway, as I'm driving, I look over to my left and see this same MF light show in the sky, except it's not on me, it's above a tree line. I could barely see an outline of this thing, but I could tell the lights were on the bottom side. I said, "Well, hello again," to myself as the hairs on my neck stood up. My unexplained flying light show then promptly did the same maneuver as it did the first time. Up and out and completely vanished. Now I am unsure of what I saw. It still freaks me out to think about it, but I know it happened, and I saw the same thing twice, and thank God it hasn't happened a third time. I was driving home with my brother between 12 and 2 a.m. I had just gotten on the highway, and in the middle divider of the road, my headlights shined on a giant man who was at least 8 to 9 feet tall, and his skin was all charcoal gray. He wasn't broad, I couldn't see his body because it looked like he was wearing a large black trench coat or cloak of some kind, but I'd imagine he would have been around 200 to 250 pounds from how his head looked. He also had red, glowing eyes, which seemed like they glowed on their own and weren't just reflecting my headlights since I could still see them once my lights were no longer shining on him. I was driving at least 50 to 60 miles per hour, so I only saw him for a few seconds. It almost looked like he was shocked to see me and was shuffling back into the bushes, but he was almost as tall as them. The way he walked creeped me out the most. He was sidestepping, but they were really short steps, like if you had to walk with your pants around your ankles or if you were a penguin or something. I yelled, "What the fuck?" And my brother, who was laying back in his seat, sat up, looked over, and said, "What the fuck?" too. We were both rattled, but we kept on driving home. This was in Oakland, California, in August 2017. I would like to talk about what I saw while driving home last night. As I was driving home from work last night, I noticed what seemed like a light that fell out of the sky. It was near a radio tower that I see in the distance each night, flashing light at the top. At first, I wasn't quite sure what happened. I thought maybe the light had detached from the top of the tower and fallen, but as soon as I thought that, I came to my senses and realized that the bulb wouldn't still be lit if it had detached. The light I saw dropped very quickly, and once it was almost to the top of the tree line, it vanished completely, not like it was obscured by the trees but completely gone. It was a bluish-white light, roughly round, and it moved quickly. To be clear, the road I was on has no street lights in this particular area for anything like glares. Can someone help me walk through this information? This is a really odd story about how I came to see a literal dogman last night at around midnight. I live in a neighborhood, by the way, but we are on the edge of a large forest behind our house. So it is not completely rural. So, I set a live trap for a mouse last night, catch and release. I can't stand to harm mice. It triggered at midnight, and the loud pop of the door woke me up. I decided I didn't want to just leave it in the cage all night, waiting for the morning. I could hear him trying to chew through the wires, and I didn't want him to torture himself or get hurt attempting to get out. So, I decided I'd just take him outside immediately. Instead of releasing mice in the yard by my house, I always go about 3 miles away into a forested area. I got into the car with a little cage, going down the street. It was literally only 1 block away from my home, and I instantly slowed on the brakes because of something enormous at the side of the road. At first, I thought, its silhouette was blacker than the night. As I slowed my car from maybe 20 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour, it suddenly came out of the street light and walked across the street in front of my car. It wasn't running, but it wasn't going slow either. I suddenly realized it was no ordinary dog, but I knew it wasn't a bear either because it didn't have much of a belly. This was 3 to 4 times the size of a wolf, and so I can confirm it was not a wolf. What I saw looked like a humanoid literally hunched over on all fours, back erect in a hunch, moving with pace across the road. The head was distinctly whale-like and enormous. It literally looked like a giant wolf head. The being had jet black fur. As black as hair can get. The legs were lanky. My brain literally froze. Instantly, I began rationalizing, but it was fairly impossible to rationalize what I had just seen. Well, that's got to be the tallest dog I've ever seen. On all fours, its backside is probably about 4 to 4.5 feet in height. The head is higher, easily reaching 5 feet. Again, there was no way this was a bear or other regular beast we're familiar with as humans. There was nothing familiar about it. To anyone who might say, definitely no. It was bigger than the largest dog breed I've ever seen. To be over 4 feet in height, at the back, not the head, while hunched over is definitely not a regular dog. It is impossible to be a bear, as none are this skinny. The humanoid aspect of it could not be denied. You could tell that if it wanted to, it could have easily stood up on 2 legs. Maybe it was just a really large dog that was sick and hunched over. What's more insane is that I could feel its energy. The energy was dark and oppressive, and really, just a sense of danger swept over me. It had a very otherworldly energy about it. To continue. I slowly continued driving and quickly stared over to the left side of the road as I was passing to see where it had gone. I was able to see its silhouette in a bush, looking back at me and watching me pass. I didn't want to stop. I was scared. I went on with my mission to release the mouse, but I can tell you this, when I got home, I ran into my garage and shut that garage door as quickly as possible. I was panicked, truly terrified. When you know what you saw, you know what you saw, they always say. I also know my mind didn't just fill in the blanks or hallucinate this. Last night I looked up stories of dogmen only to find people's descriptions and drawings were fairly identical to what I had witnessed. What are the odds of that? Now I am convinced it is real. I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd see something like this. Does anyone know how common Oregon sightings are? This happened last year, around June or July, I can't really remember exactly. I was working at a very big air conditioning factory in the rice capital of the world, in pretty much central Arkansas. One night I got off of work at around 8 in the afternoon. I went to one of my coworkers' houses and proceeded to indulge in plenty of beer. But it was well after midnight when I left his house to make the half-hour drive to my house. Don't drink and drive, kids, but I was on the main highway that connects Stuttgart to England and was cruising around 65 miles per hour and really had no oncoming traffic as everyone was either heading the same way as me or had already turned off elsewhere. I had a car in which I installed a light bar on the front bumper. Proud redneck here, I had my light bar on, and it really shined up the road in good ways. I went around a curve and noticed something dark off to the passenger side of the road in a ditch walking the same way as I was heading. As I got closer to the object, I could tell it was covered in black fur and was walking on 2 feet. As I got close enough to see the complete look of the creature, it turned and looked at me. It felt like it peered into my soul. I could tell it had a wolf-like head with a muscular body. I don't know if it was the alcohol I drank that made me see it or what, but I didn't stop. I know I probably wasn't seeing stuff because the car that was behind me slammed its brakes and backed up to get an angle of the field with their headlights. I kept driving and drove the rest of the way home, doing over 100 miles per hour. I made it home, to which I promptly ran in the house and slept with my gun in my lap with me. That night, I kept hearing things walk around the outside of my house, and my bulldog would cower in his kennel and not get out of it. I have not drank more than 3 beers in a single sitting since. My dad saw the Michigan dog man back in the 70s and 80s in the northern part of Michigan. I remember the first time he told me. I had never heard of it but was just starting to get into the paranormal/cryptid universe, and I was shocked. He said he and a few buddies were driving up North Michigan to their other buddy's house to go hunting when they pulled over to take a quick bathroom break. If anyone knows northern Michigan, you know how dense the forest can be. They all got out, and as they were doing their business, one of them started howling as a joke. Then they heard something howl back at them. Very close. It happened again, and they all jumped in the car as fast as they could. As they were pulling back on the road, my dad said a dog-like creature wearing a tattered soldier uniform came from behind the brush and stood there. He said he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and it was as if time stood still for a few minutes. They continued driving away as fast as they could, which caused them to take the wrong turn and get lost. My dad said they had to sleep in the car that night so they could find their way back to their friend's house in daylight. I know my dad wouldn't make up the story. He said a few years later, a bunch of sightings started coming out of the woodwork in northern Michigan as well. There's even a song about it. I'm curious, has anyone seen a dog man or any other cryptids in Michigan? This happened to me years ago. I was driving through rural Utah on my way home from college for the weekend. There is a road called Emma Park Road that is rarely traveled, and the state doesn't maintain it, but it would cut about 20 minutes off of my drive, so I would take it when driving home. I was driving down a part of the road that is straight with a small hill at the end, with small ditches on either side of the road and small desert bushes and trees as far as the eye can see. Just ahead of me on the road in broad daylight, something small, I assume a rabbit, ran across the road. Nothing strange here. But then I saw what was chasing it. It was a tall biped, my best guess is at least 6.5 feet tall. It was skinny to the point of looking almost skeletal, I could see the rib cage, and was black to the point that I couldn't see any details, it was just silhouetted. Its legs were canine, and its arms were so long they almost dragged the ground. It happened so fast that I didn't get a good look at what the head looked like, but I think it was a canine to match the legs. When I got to the point on the road that it crossed, I looked to try to get a better look at it, but it was nowhere to be seen. I haven't told many people about it because the people I did tell acted like I was crazy or imagining things. I would always get responses like, "I drive that road all the time and have never seen anything," as if that discredited my experience. On April 11, 2012, a man and his girlfriend had a frightening encounter with a strange creature on November 20, 2011, outside of Troy in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. At about 11:05 p.m. that evening, they were driving onto Mud Creek Road, traveling west towards Highway 14 near Troy. As they continued down the dark road, their attention was drawn to the left side of the roadway. The man, who was the driver, saw some movement and mentioned it to his friend. The woman initially thought that a naked man was crawling on the side of the road. The driver decreased his speed, swerved his truck in the middle of the road, and directed the high beams of his headlights towards the subject. The driver stopped about 30 to 40 feet away. They soon realized that this was not a person, but instead a creature that was crawling very low to the ground. As they watched, the creature moved into a squatting position with its back completely straight, somewhat like the stance of a kangaroo. The arms of the creature were held tightly to its body. What looked like long claws that resembled the talons of an eagle were easily visible. The claws were estimated to be about 8 to 10 inches in length. One claw was shorter than the other three. The creature had a muscular body. The head of the beast appeared to be oversized and shaped like that of a wolf. At the top of its head were two pointed bat-like ears that looked to be about 4 to 6 inches long. The entire creature, according to the man, was covered with dull, wrinkly, dark black skin. The man described seeing large canine-like teeth in its mouth. The eyes of the creature were about the size of a silver dollar and were shiny black. The man stated that even though he had his high beams directed at the creature, the eyes did not reflect at all. The man said he looked over the body during the 12-second encounter and, for some reason, thought the creature should have wings, but none were apparent. In the squatted position, the creature seemed to be about 5 feet tall. At this point, the creature was in the left lane of the road and about 1 to 2 feet onto the pavement. As the couple watched in amazement, the creature began to stretch its body. The man said that at this point, the animal started to stand up on its back legs while also falling over onto its front feet. The driver said that in this position, the creature seemed to be about 6 to 7 feet tall. The animal then fell over on all four legs. The witnesses observed that the front claws of the creature were now 2 feet across the center line of the highway, while the back feet remained 1.5 feet from the edge of the road. The creature then turned its head to the right and looked towards the vehicle. The driver told me that it looked directly at them with a horrific expression, like it was panicked. The fellow saw it and took a deep breath. He had the feeling that the creature didn't realize that it was being observed, and when it realized it was like it was caught doing something. Once it realized it was being observed, it leaned back slightly and then reached forward with its claws. The creature then took one tremendous leap, cleared a 7-foot embankment, and moved out of sight into a wooded area. The man estimated that leap was about 40 feet long. As it was in the process of leaping, it was perfectly straight and held its front claws forward. The legs, as it was leaping, were only slightly larger than broomsticks or about the size of a walking crane and were very long. Then, just a second after the creature was gone from sight, something else odd occurred. A large bird, possibly an owl, suddenly rushed at the passenger side window, almost hitting the glass, then took off and did not return. It happened so fast that they were unsure if it was an owl or not. The witnesses indicated that this creature appeared to be changing form. The driver said, its shape was nothing like when it was squatted. The woman said that it shaped into another form. She thought it was a dark brown color and looked like a werewolf with a little back hair. She estimated that when it was leaping into the woods, she thought it stood about 9 feet tall. The man, after the experience, went on to the internet to try to figure out what he saw and told me that the closest way he could describe the creature would be a gargoyle with no wings. The man commented, I will never forget what we saw that night. I live in a town in Wisconsin, and although we have a lot of woods and wildlife where I live, there are no bears or wolves. Not in my part of the state. Maybe a black bear once in a while. But big wolves, never. I live on the outskirts of a decently sized town, and we have a few neighbors but mostly woods off a highway. In my neighborhood, there is a park and a small pine grove that the city decided not to demolish. You can see this wood from the highway near my house. I really don't know how to describe this anymore. In any event, this is what happened. One day when I was 12, I think, I was in the back seat of my mom's car. We were on the highway, where you can see my house, my neighborhood, and that tree line in the park. While in the back of the car, like I usually do, I was watching everything go by out the window. I saw my house, and then on the other side of the highway, near my house in that park, I saw it. What looked to be like a wolf, or what I thought at first was a wild dog. But here is the thing, it was foaming at the mouth and was pure white and a little tan. And it was big. We were going 60 miles per hour, so my mom didn't see it. When I got home after our drive, my 12-year-old mind thought it would be fun to go find it. Luckily, I didn't find it, and I thought maybe it went away. And it did for a while. Fast forward I think for 2 years, I was driving in the opposite direction with my mom and dad. This time we were on a different highway, going past a cornfield. When I was watching the corn go by, I saw the same creature again. Big and white and foaming at the mouth. Looking at our car and me as we drove by. Nobody saw it but me. But I know what I saw and cannot explain it. Here is my problem with these experiences. First of all, even though we have wolves in Wisconsin, they are just gray wolves and are about 45 miles north of me. And they still look nothing like what I saw. Second, why was it foaming at the mouth, and why did I see it twice? I didn't think much of it until about a year ago, when I learned my home state is riddled with dog sightings. Anyone else see anything like this? Yesterday, I was driving home and passed these two guys, really distinct looking guys. Both were shirtless, both had bandanas wrapped around their heads and towels around their necks. One was wearing a necklace, one had dark blonde hair, the other had weirdly dyed orange hair. If you've ever seen Always Sunny, they looked like the McPoyles. So, like I said, there were two very distinguishable people, and they were both walking slowly on the sidewalk. I made note of them because of their appearance. About 5 minutes later, about 2 miles, I stopped at a light and looked to my right, and I saw the exact same two guys walking toward the light I was at. They were both walking slowly as hell and clearly had no mode of transportation aside from walking. There's no way they could have possibly walked 2 miles in 5 minutes. I still have no idea how it could have happened, but I feel pretty damn confident that it couldn't have been different people. A 17-year-old motorist traveling almost 10 miles north of Aurora, Indiana, on a Saturday night claims to have encountered an unusual figure on the road. While driving his black Chevrolet Cavalier southbound along North Hogan Road, a figure was spotted in the headlights of the automobile as it was crouched down near a puddle of water. From the driver's perspective, the figure was spotted on the windshield on the right of the car. After passing the frail-looking figure, the driver looked into his rear-view mirror and again observed, illuminated by the taillights of his car, what he described as a tall, abnormal figure that moved strangely with pointed joints that buckled out. He estimated the figure to be around 6 feet, 7 inches. It had protruding joints and moved very strangely. The driver said he was able to ascertain the figure, alleged to be dark gray or black and pencil thin, stood up and took several steps toward the woods along the roadside. The figure definitely walked on 2 legs and was thought somehow to be a male, although no clothing was noted. No face or eyes could be seen, but the witness had the impression that the figure was looking straight at him. The figure was immediately thought to be something out of the ordinary, not a human being. The duration of the sighting was hurried and possibly within the 3 to 4 seconds range. The driver continued on for a small distance after passing the figure and finally put on his brakes, coming to a stop at an estimated 2-minute walking distance on the road from the location of the sighting. He looked back to further observe the entity. At that point, a second car came into view, approached from the opposite direction, passed, and then reached the spot on the road where the figure was thought to be. The 17-year-old motorist reportedly watched closely and observed the second car undertake what he thought to be an evasive maneuver near the vicinity of where he thought the figure would be situated, and then the car turned around at that spot and shortly pulled up behind him, somewhat in the grass. There was an elderly couple in the car, both in their late 60s or early 70s and both with gray hair. The driver, who wore glasses, said, "Boy, did you see something back there? I'll tell you right now, that was no person." The passenger, an elderly female, said, "It was no human being. It was no man. The elderly couple was reportedly spooked but offered to follow the first witness for the remainder of the trip down North Hogan Road, clearly in the opposite direction of their intended destination route. It was thought that the elderly couple had observed this same figure on the opposite side of the road and possibly had observed it more closely. Later, the 17-year-old witness was said to have become hysterical, and within an hour, he was describing the figure as an alien. It was an underwear-changing moment. I was in my early 20s when this happened, still living with my parents. Back then, I was used to driving around at night, listening to music, and just killing time. I grew up rurally and didn't have a large circle of friends, so I often had nothing better to do than get out of the house, and I just enjoyed cruising around. This night was different, as I had an argument with my father and had to leave the house just to clear my head. I decided on the way to grab a small flask of vodka at the gas station and just drive out of the village and look at the stars. The area where I ended up parking was surrounded by cornfields and small patches of wood. Very agricultural, and I could still make out the lights of the closest village in the distance and hear the hum of the freeway relatively close by. The last area you'd expect to run into is something unusual, not very remote, no untouched wilderness. I drove off the main road, parking on a dirt road leading into a little patch of forest. There was a large cornfield on my right and a patch of grassland on my right, just a meadow, no fencing or animals though. It was pitch black, so I left the car lights on to take a stroll, vodka flask in hand. I immediately felt nervous getting out of the car. There was kind of an eerie vibe to the area, despite how mundane it looked. I was hyper aware of the sounds around me, the hum of the freeway and crickets chirping. All I wanted to do in that instance was keep driving and just go home, but back then I figured it was just me being a coward, and while there was no way that I would stay and stargaze in this mood, I figured I'd owe it to myself to just go for a short jog towards that patch of wood just to prove to myself that I wasn't just a big pussycat. It hadn't occurred to me back then that my subconscious might have picked up on me being watched, because when I started to run towards the woods, just at the edge of what my car lights illuminated, something broke out of the undergrowth and sprinted towards me. I was startled like this before when it turned out it was deer, but this time it wasn't. I nearly fell over as a seemingly naked man broke out of the forest and ran towards me. I stared in disbelief as I made out its features. It was humanoid, light skin colored from what I could tell, way larger than I am, a good 2 heads taller. I'm 5'11", and seemed very muscular. I did not make out any hair, or genitalia. I don't recall if I jumped or tripped, but I wavered for a moment and had to catch my footing as I was so startled I almost fell. Now I think I remember it having larger, animal-like eyes, but I remember distinctly that it had no defined lips and a very short nose, mostly consisting of elongated slits. It circled around me. Later on, I figured it might not have wanted to directly walk into the lights of my car, and made a noise at me like a startled dog. It was kind of a huff, but it felt very hostile. Then it ran off, crossing the road into the cornfield with very large, seemingly confident struts. It was really fast and did not seem to be bothered by breaking straight through a cornfield. I'm not sure, but I also think it had exaggerated leg muscles on the back of its legs despite being generally slender but of wiry strength, if that makes sense. It took me a bit to gain my composure, and my hands were shaking all the way home. I also drove over a curb at too high speed and was getting a flat tire, which I noticed when I got home. Earlier this year, in March, I was in my work van, driving from Morninglid to Littlehampton, West Sussex, to start my deliveries. It was early morning, around 5 a.m. It was still pitch black, but the weather was clear. I was driving southbound on the A24 and had just passed the southern tip of the village of Ashington, soon to be approaching the Storrington roundabout. On my left-hand side, there is a section of grass that runs for a few hundred feet and is about 6 feet wide or so before it becomes a huge thicket of brambles. I saw a creature that I can only describe as cardboard box color. It was about 4 feet tall, but down on its haunches to where its heels were touching its butt. It was facing diagonally away from me into the base of the bushes, so I saw its back and left side of its body more so than anything else. Its spine was showing, as were its ribs, but not to the extreme, and it had small, round ears that were in the location of humans but shaped in a similar way to what black bears are. It had a tail that rose up into a subtle S shape, was very skinny, and seemed to be hairless like the rest of the animal. The face, from what I could see, had a muzzle but was not extremely pronounced, and it seemed to be tracking something in the grass. My guess would be some kind of rodent. Its head movements were very digital and all over the place, and it jumped like how a fox would when pouncing, but in doing so, I saw the soles of the feet, which I remember extremely clearly as they looked like ours. But given the hours that I'm awake and the fact that I'm a proper country boy, I see multiple foxes on a daily basis. This is as far from a fox as a monkey is. It was nothing I had ever seen before, in person, on the telephone, on the internet, or in books. The duration lasted about 5 seconds, and as soon as I saw it, I had shivers all over my body, and I literally said out loud, "What the F-K was that?" I couldn't believe my eyes. I got to the roundabout probably 30 seconds later and doubled back on myself to get back onto the same road again in hopes I could get a second glimpse, but I wasn't lucky. The thing about it all that was almost stranger than the sighting itself was that I had such a strong feeling of shame that came over me. I felt so shameful seeing it, and I have no idea why. I remember being in tears because of it, and I don't fully understand why, but I felt like I had no business seeing it, and if I had a regular job that never required me to be up so early, then I never would have. I still have no idea what it was. If anyone has seen anything similar, please share or have any insight. Me and my friend Cass decided to go on a drive about an hour ago because there was a spot I'd been looking at going to at night because it was secluded and a good spot to smoke in general. Around the time we started talking about it, he noted that he started smelling something sweet, cherries and a hint of cigar. I was familiar with this entity as it's been around my room since I moved in back in 2020. It's not a malevolent entity and is actually quite kind. Cass stated that it felt like he'd been hugged and just overall felt comfort with the entity around. So we go on the drive, and we're talking and all, and we turn down the last road until the destination, when I see a tree down in the road. It didn't block the road completely, but it was too narrow of a gap for my car to fit. Well, I knew a back road that led to the same destination, so we turned around and headed down that way. It was a very wooded back road, there was no service, very few houses for miles, and it was surrounded by trees. It was the type of road that only had one lane because of how unused it was. As I'm driving, we're talking, and we pass over a bridge. I pointed it out as a spot where I wanted to take him another time since it's just a neat area. Not long after we passed it, he said, "Did you see that? It's a very curvy road," so I initially assumed it was an animal, as I hadn't seen anything. I asked what he saw, and he said, "It looked like something that crossed the road." Immediately, I got an intense feeling of dread. I asked if he felt it too, and he confirmed that he did, so I stopped the car, took a moment, and immediately said, "We're not supposed to be here." He agreed, and I turned around, heading back to where we just came. The dread got more intense, but after we crossed the bridge, it eased but was still there. I stated that whatever it was wasn't allowed to follow us home, and it wasn't allowed on my property. It started to disappear, and we kept seeing things along the road like shadows. As I was driving to the main road, a white truck pulled up very fast to a stop sign on a side road, almost as if out of thin air, and pulled out behind us. I didn't take much note of it until I looked in my rear view and saw it tailing the hell out of us. I pointed it out, and Cass said he didn't like the feeling he got from the truck. We got to the stop sign that led out to the main road, and I purposefully didn't turn my blinker on in case it was following us, but the truck did, and it was turning the same way as us. After I made the turn, I waited a few moments before looking back in the rear view, and it was gone. It disappeared into thin air. The drive home was silent, and Cass waited until we got back to talk about things he knew and should have thought of before we even got in the car. I was telling the story to a friend over Discord and asked Cass to describe the thing he saw in the road, asking if it walked on 2 legs or 4. He said, it didn't have legs. It was brown and looked like a head that had just crossed the road. When I asked him about it now, he said that it was tall, taller than the doorframe of my closet, and he saw it from a distance, so he didn't know what its body looked like. I asked if it could have been a bat, and he emphasized that it couldn't have been. During the drive home, we both noted that it felt like there was a hand on each of our shoulders. He pointed out that the log in the road could have been a sign not to go, as well as the friendly entity that appeared in my room beforehand. I'm thinking it's a wendigo. I saw a Bigfoot, or whatever you want to call it, about 15 years ago. I was with a friend, and we were driving around Slidell, Louisiana. We weren't from this area. Somehow we got lost and ended up driving through a rural area that had a lot of woods. I was in the passenger seat. I noticed something up ahead, walking along the side of the road just like a person would. It was walking with the flow of traffic, so we were behind it, and I was looking at the back of it. It was dark, sort of thin, and covered with fur. It wasn't stocky, like a gorilla. It was tall, like 7 or 8 feet. As we passed it, it was literally 3 or 4 feet from me, I would guess. I asked my friend what the hell we just saw, and I asked him if he wanted to go back to see. We agreed not to. It scared the shit out of me. I know it sounds crazy. I never really believed in anything like this before. I'm afraid of the woods now. I just wanted to share what happened and wanted to know if anyone else had experienced anything similar. Just 30 minutes ago, I saw something I could not comprehend. Now I will explain what happened, but below I will provide some other information about why I am dumbfounded, and maybe someone can help me ease this image out of my mind. This night was cold and dry, with no wind and no moon, perfect for nocturnal predators. At 4 a.m., there are no cars, especially on Friday night. As I came up a hill, with only empty fields on both sides of the road and shallow ditches, there was something on the left side of the road about 50 to 70 feet in front of my car. Then I saw a four-legged gray thing dash across the road in an instant. It was so fast it blurred in my headlights, something low to the ground, human in length, maybe even shape, and I cannot stress how fast this thing was. It was there, and boom, it was gone. This creature was either running after or from something. I must have gone into an instinctive mode. As I came to my senses 5 miles down the road, looking at myself, the car was going 80 miles per hour, eyes darting back and forth from the mirror and the road, the radio off, and both hands gripping the wheel tight as hell. I tried to relax, but the moment of crossing for whatever kept playing out in my mind. Now more details. Driving home from work on the highway, going 75 miles per hour, 10 miles per hour above the speed limit, there are no cars in sight. Nebraska winters are a mixed bag. Sometimes it is 50 degrees at night, sometimes it is minus 30 degrees. Tonight was a nice minus 9 degrees. I have lived here for 23 years in the same town, about 45 minutes outside of Lincoln. The drive home is familiar, as I have been down it since the day I was born. I worked nights as a tradesman in Lincoln, Nebraska. We get off at 2:30 a.m. normally, but I was close to finishing a job, and I didn't want the daytime people. Utah driving on Highway 191, a couple had pulled off to the side of the road after arguing briefly. They were at the County Road 46 intersection, and it was still a bit dark, but the sky was getting brighter. She stayed in the car while her boyfriend stepped out of the truck to get some fresh air. As he was about to finish, he took a quick glance at the road behind them and noticed in the distance, a little less than a mile, a figure on the side of the road hobbling as it walked toward the truck. This surprised him in that they hadn't seen or passed a person since they left Monticello. As he stood there, he realized it grew in size, meaning that it approached at incredible speed. Backing up, he yelled at his girlfriend, "Get ready to leave fast." At a dead sprint, he ran into his truck and jumped into the passenger side, only to find himself screaming at the top of his lungs at his girlfriend, instructing her to go. 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 Slamming his door, he took one glance back outside his window as the truck peeled off and saw what he said could only be described as the most mangy-looking human or animal he had ever seen. He couldn't tell if it was in rags or just a heavy-coated black animal running or hobbling very fast, as it did quickly catch up to the side of his truck. According to him, the way the eyes looked struck him with terror. They were very large, almost bulging out as would his praying mantis's eyeballs, but with pinpoint pupils. Too afraid, he looked away from his wife, who was starting to shake uncontrollably. He took the steering wheel, realizing she also took a glance at this thing, her foot still flooring the accelerator. Trying to calm her down, he maintained a firm grip on the steering wheel for a good 2 minutes, finally looking over his shoulders outside the truck and seeing nothing. Half an hour later, they were driving into the city limits of Moab, Utah. When I was about 8 years old, my mom and I were driving by a Walmart supercenter at night. The store was not open yet, so there were no lights on other than the ones in the parking lot. While we were approaching the store, I saw nothing but a building. As we were passing it, I looked up, and behind the building, I saw two giant shadow figures, each at least twice the height of the store itself. They were not thin, like a slender figure, they had substance and thickness to them. They remained standing behind the store the entire time we drove past. I don't recall when or if they disappeared, I can only still see what they looked like, as clear as day. I told my mom when I saw them, and she believed me because of how afraid I was. I hadn't thought about this encounter in a while until I had a dream about them last night. This time, instead of seeing shadows, I was pointing a thermal imaging camera at a mountain and saw this same kind of figure, only this time it was colored yellow and green by the thermal camera, and I could tell that it was a man that had very long, straight hair. It was as large as the mountain it was standing on, and it looked menacing. In the dream, the sight of this figure inspired so much terror that I instantly woke up, still feeling the extreme fear. My instincts tell me that what I saw in the dream was the same type of creature or being I saw behind Walmart. The first ones I saw were in Arizona, and this dream happened in Oregon. I've tried to do some of my own research, but I can't find anything on shadow figures that is huge. Anyone have any insights? I live on the west coast of BC and Canada, about halfway up the coast. I was driving my girlfriend back to her granddad's house 2 towns over from mine, about a 2.5-hour drive on the highways. I had driven her home and spent the day visiting her family. This town she is from is right on the coast. It's a port city. Not super important, but the point is that I spent the day there and am now getting ready to drive back home. About 25 to 30 minutes into the drive, I'm on the highway that runs parallel to the mouth of the river on one side and the CN tracks on the other, so it goes rail on my left, the road I'm on, then the sort of mini channel where the river ends. I'm driving, it's getting dark, but I'm not tired or drowsy at all. There are a few rest stops along the road on my right, on the river bank. I need to piss, so I start slowing down at the first one, and something scurries across the road. And that's almost all that happened. It was four-legged, or, at least from what I saw, black. Like black and black. Like the unnaturally dark. There was no texture or anything to it, almost like a void of light or color in the shape this thing was. It ran out of the bush and over the rails. I was going slow enough that wind and highway noise were gone, and I heard it. It sounded like metal tapping as it ran over the ballast and rail. Then the sound of if you took a rod or rebar and stabbed it into the ground. Then metal again as it ran in front of me, across the road. Its body was shaped like how people describe a UFO. An almost flat disc shape. Like an oval stretched out with the legs protruding from the front and back. It had no features, no eyes, no face, no mouth, that I could see. I didn't see the bottom or front much. It ran across the road, its limbs stretching out as it ran. Then it ran into the rest area, over the bank, and, I'm guessing, into the river. I kept driving. I didn't piss until I got home 2 hours later. I've tried searching this up online, but I've never had any luck. If anyone can help me figure out what I saw. I'm going to recount a story that happened about 6 years ago when I was living with my parents at my family home. The strangeness started as I was driving down the main back road to get back to my house, which connected my hometown to a neighboring town that some of my friends lived in. It was roughly 10 p.m., and I was following a friend back to my home. He had gained quite the lead on me and maybe arrived at my house 5 to 6 minutes before I did. The road itself is called Tyree Springs and is a hilly, snaking back road with an incline on one side and a descent on the other. I have driven this road thousands of times, if not more, throughout my teenage years leading up to this. As I was driving, I noticed a blue light following behind me, almost like a motorcycle light. It is important to note that it was early November and maybe 50 degrees outside. This doesn't rule out the motorcycle, but it would strike me as odd for someone to be riding that late at that temperature. At the time, I had a junky first-generation DSM with an exhaust. As I was trying to figure out what was behind me, I pushed the clutch in to maybe catch a sound of a motorcycle or something. Silence, absolutely nothing but road noise. This had spooked me a little bit, so I dropped gear and sped up to about 65 miles an hour to get some distance. When I looked back, I saw that the light had been decently far behind me. I look again in my rear view, only to see that the light is right on my bumper, even closer than it had been before. I was extremely scared and proceeded to accelerate up to about 85 miles per hour, and as I was rounding the long, sweeping right-hand turn, I looked back and saw the light stop on the top of the hill. I had just come down and darted right. Not in the motion of something turning into a driveway or anything like that. Just the light accelerating to the right. To this day, I have no idea what it was, but it spooked me beyond belief. This takes place in midsummer in New York. It was my best friend's last day at his old house, which was filled with weird shit. I've experienced stuff there and have a few experiences that can be boiled down to ghosts all the way to feeling like my life was in danger, which is why I refused to spend the night there as that was when the feeling came. So this was their last day at the old house, getting all their stuff to their new house. I was helping them that day. All I remember from that day is walking in the house, seeing the windows filled with dead flies, like more than I thought could be in a house, and then driving to their new house at night, which had to be at least 8 hours of missing time. I was confused, and I asked them, "Where are we?" And was told we are in, bumfuck nowhere town, on the way to the new house. I said, "But we never got the rest of your stuff." My friend's brother looked at me concerned and said, "Yeah, we did. What happened?" I said, "And I was just told they would tell me later." This is a story best to come from their mouth, as I cannot remember it, just 8 hours gone and only their word on what happened. All they said was that I was very quiet the whole time when SHT went down in the house. We are driving, and we notice there are no other cars on the road, which is strange as we are going through quite a few small towns, and it was still early in the night on a Friday. The little brother mentions this, and as soon as he does, a bunch of cars come around the corner at this point. It's just a circumstance, but there will be a pattern. We keep driving, and we notice all the houses are completely empty, like the lights are on, but we see nothing in them, no furniture, nothing. I mention this, and boom, Next door we noticed people just standing in the window staring at our car. We noticed this in the next 3 or 4 houses. At this point, we are shifting bricks and notice this drive is taking way too long. They only moved a few towns over, and this drive was taking well over an hour, and it feels like we've been driving in a cornfield for a while. My friend says that what the fuck is going on is that we should be almost there by now. Lo and behold, the cornfield ends, and we recognize where we are again. I saw a pattern yet because I didn't, and I said something I regret to this day. Man, what other weird shit is going to happen tonight? As soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew I fucked up, and my friend and his brother started yelling at me, saying why would I say that? We get into a yelling match, but we never argue, and my friend slams on the brakes. In front of us is what I can only describe as a big cat, like the size of a person with the head of an owl. Whatever it was struck so much damn fear into the 3 of us. His little brother, a 20-year-old dude who played football, just started crying, and I was on the edge, like I was going insane. I want to have a future scientific career. This shit wasn't making sense, and I was having a mental gymnastics show trying to figure this out. My friend just stared at it until he said someone grabbed their phone. His battery was dead from the time he was in the old house. This woke me up, and I went to grab my phone, and this whatever ran into the field into the darkness as soon as I started pulling it out. So we finally get to the new house. We pull in the driveway and back into their parking space when his brother says, "What the hell is that?" We look up and see what I can say looks like a pure white Bigfoot crawling around like a spider. It has red eyes, and it just crawls away into the forest. We sit in the car for 45 minutes until their mother arrives. No drugs or alcohol were taken that night, well, not until after we got into the new house. The best logical conclusion I can come to is that there was a CO2 leak in the old house, and we were having a group hallucination. This is, by far, the weirdest day of my life. I mention this now because my friend said the new owners of the old house have a for sale sign on it. They were there for less than 2 years. I was told they had a thriving daycare there for about 1.5 years and then suddenly closed it down. So first off, this happened when I was about 14 or 15. The location was in County Monaghan, Ireland, Broomfield, to be exact. I also want to say that I had never tried alcohol or smoked before I was 18. Long story short, I go with my father to take his friend to the pub, obviously. I go to get the chance to drive the car back to learn to drive. This was a Shebeen country pub, by the way. These are very rural, not light type roads, it's just pitch black small country roads. You can see a car coming a very, very long way away. I didn't get the chance as we left Dad's friend off and turned our direction at the end of the lane. After about a few minutes of driving, there was a light. Now, to be honest, it only looked like an orange street light. I grew up on an estate that moved to the countryside, so it looked completely normal to me until my dad reminded me there's no street lights, he's from the countryside. I panicked, and then he said it's probably someone lapping foxes. So we are all the while driving, me sitting in the front passenger seat, and we are getting closer, and it's getting bigger. I should say Dad didn't slow down, thinking people were in a field shining the light. Next thing you know, it's full view in front of the car, and Dad has stopped the car, not the engine off, just stopped moving. The honest to God first thing that came into my head was that no one could help us now if we wanted. The only way to describe it was if you took the sun and put it in the middle of a rural Irish road. I don't know how long I looked at it before I climbed down into the footwell of the car, absolutely shitting myself, and looked at my dad and said, "Please drive." He was still staring at it with his mouth open. I don't remember much, but I remember climbing out and him giving off to me about doing that, then going home, and the whole thing was brushed off as someone shining lights at drunk drivers from the Shebeen or pub, so I just forgot about it. Until 2017, I was on holiday with my dad in Spain, and I said to him, "I want to ask you something," and he said, "I know what you're going to say," then proceeded to tell me he thought he was going to die that night after seeing that. There is still no explanation, though. I had a really weird experience about 3 months ago while driving home. I had to move my mom from Minneapolis to Madison, Wisconsin, and I was driving home on one of my trips, moving her stuff alone. It was about 1 a.m., and I was in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't in a town or anything, and I was really tired because I had been driving all day, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I distinctly saw a person running out of the woods straight towards the side of my car. I was going about 65, and I thought, okay, I've been driving too long, and now I'm seeing things. All of a sudden, smack into the side of my car. I was terrified. It was pitch black out there, there was no traffic. There's nobody around, and there's nothing near me. I was just in the middle of nowhere. This came out of the woods. It ran into the side of my car. My car was dented. It hit me so hard. Out of the corner of my eye, I was really tired, so I don't know what it was I saw, but I could have sworn it was on 2 legs, and it was probably about 6 feet tall or taller. In the corner of my eye, what I thought I saw was a man wearing a gray sweatshirt and a hood. I was too scared. I was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't understand why someone would come out of the woods and run straight into my car when there's no traffic or anything. If they needed to cross the street, why would they wait until there was a car coming? So I thought I should call the police. Then I thought, what did I just see? What was that? What do I say to the police that somebody darted out of the woods and ran into my car? So I drove home. I was probably about 30 or 40 minutes away, and I was shaking. I was scared. I don't know what just happened to me. I got out to see if there was damage to my car. I thought about calling the police, and I decided it had to be an animal because there was nothing around there. My husband and I were driving down a back road to my parents' place. The same road that we have both traveled many, many times before. It's a very rural road and very curvy. At one end of the road, there is a sharp right curve just before the stop sign, but there are no trees blocking the view, so you could still see around the curve as it was small. There is actually a yard there. As we came to the curve and then the stop, I noticed car headlights in my rear view but thought nothing of it as I was thinking of one of my very close childhood friends who had died there only 2 years ago. I remember for a split second thinking they were very close, but that was it. We made our turn, and before we could even get the wheel completely straight, my husband mentioned the car. By that point, I had time to wonder what happened to the headlights, and when he mentioned them, I was kind of taken back. Especially given the location, where my friend died, we figured that maybe yard lights or reflectors could have been to blame, and we knew surely we'd have our explanation when we passed by on the way back home. Fast forward to the trip back home. We turn on the road and can see that there were no lights that would have made a car appear on our rear like it did. I want to reiterate that this was a dark road, and you can see car lights for a good distance. I asked my husband to turn around so we could drive back by it like we did the first time, just to make darn sure it wasn't a house light or something. As we start to slow down to turn around, a car comes from nowhere, flying and catching us quickly. It gets on our bumper, and all I can see are lights. No car. Just headlights. As we approached the stop sign at the opposite end of the road from the first sighting, it slowed, and the lights looked as if they had made a turn into the last driveway before the stop. I can only describe it as being chased off the road, like a junkyard dog. Just chasing us out of there. It was scary, for sure. My mother and I live in southern Oregon and have had multiple encounters with cryptids, the first being what we believe was Wolfman. The second was some humanoid with wings. It walked across our roof and flew down in front of our neighbor's house, landed on 2 feet, and just casually walked away. It sounded like it was wearing boots while it walked across our roof and hit the pavement. The wings sounded like Bateman's cape. None of them felt menacing until now. We were driving home from Vegas and finally hit Susanville for gas and a snack. It was around midnight Saturday night. A few miles northwest of Susanville on the 44, we started seeing a lot of wildlife, so I was driving cautiously and had my eyes peeled for deer. I saw what I thought was a deer on the side of the road and slowed down to slow roll, about 30 miles per hour. It was huge and had long stilt-like legs. The front legs were spread really wide, so I slowed down more trying to process what I was seeing. Its head was down, eating, and as we got closer, it turned to look at us. The neck was thick and elongated, and as it swung its head towards us, we saw its face. It wasn't quite a deer face, I didn't see ears, and the nose and mouth were elongated as well, almost like an anteater. Its eyes reflected red in my headlights. We both basically screamed and jumped back from the side window we were looking through. I swerved and sped away. Looking into its eyes was absolutely unnerving. Not a deer was the first thing that came to mind, but I honestly have no idea what we saw. Has anyone else seen something similar or any idea of what we might have seen? My partner and I just got back from a long camping trip in northern Arizona. Marble Canyon, Vermilion Cliffs, and finally in the Kaibab National Forest, where this encounter took place. We were driving and off-roading all day on the forest roads deep in the forest, near the north rim of the Grand Canyon. We were hunting hard for the perfect camping spot, and it was starting to get dark, and my partner was getting frustrated. So, we told ourselves, we'll go to the end of the next trail and camp there. Unfortunately, where that trail ended was at an expansive burn scar, a forest that was completely wiped out by fire last summer. Very few living trees remained standing. It was spooky, but we decided to make the best of the situation. After getting camp set up and eating dinner, we were just hanging out by the fire. We started hearing some snapping branches in the woods and lit up our flashlights. We see nothing. I grabbed my shotgun just in case. At this point, we're trying to be as quiet as possible, listening very intently to the woods. It was a clear night, but there was no moon. It was very dark, beyond the reach of the firelight. Then we hear what sounds like a whisper from a woman. We're trying so hard to make out the words, but they sounded foreign. Like another language. It shortly thereafter grows to a crying sound. Then it turns to wailing. Like someone in incredible pain. We were absolutely terrified at this point. The sound eventually stopped, and we started to feel very unwelcome and very cold. We knew immediately that this was a very strange paranormal experience, but we were not sure if this was like a skinwalker or maybe just a ghost. What do you think? My name is Rick Martinez, and I am a retired truck driver. This happened when I was like 30 years old. I am now 62. On the road, I saw many strange things. I've told this story over and over. A lot of people don't believe me. But it starts off in Stockton, California, where I picked up a load of pipe. My destination was Salt Lake City, Utah. I was supposed to refuel in Barstow, California, at a truck stop. But lo and behold, they were out of fuel. So I told my supervisor, "Hey, I got like half a tank of fuel." He told me to continue, and I hit the first truck stop I saw. So 100 miles into Nevada, there is nothing but desert. I saw nothing but a sparsely lit desert with a couple towns. I noticed my gauge set was reading empty, and I'm thinking that's not right. So I took the first exit I saw and pulled over. I told my supervisor, who was right behind me an hour away, that I was afraid to continue on and run the tanks dry. So he told me to sit still, and he would be by in an hour, and we could siphon some of the fuel from his tanks into mine. So I sat there, and I noticed that it was a small town with sparse lighting. As I sat there, I couldn't run the engine, so I couldn't listen to the radio, so I sat there in silence. I don't do drugs, and I didn't make this up, so listen carefully. As I'm sitting there, I notice all the undone construction. A trailer parked to my right, completely dark, and a church off to my left, about a block away, with its lights on. It's about 2 a.m. and I see this jackrabbit hopping around my truck. It hops around, just stares at me, and keeps hopping around. So I'm getting hungry, and I notice what looks to be a convenience store another block away from the church. So I get off the truck and decide to walk to the store. While I'm walking, I keep hearing this dog howling like it's in pain. As I'm passing the church, the two doors are wide open, and I hear people clapping like they're having services. As I pass the church, I look inside, and there's no one except for this skinny white old man reading from the Bible and talking about hell. I don't linger too long and pass the church. Then I heard clapping again. About then, the dog starts howling again. I notice there's a bunch of empty houses on this street that goes uphill. I am still making my way towards what I think is a little mini-mart. All the time, the dog keeps howling. All the lights are on. As I go inside, this little old lady with glasses is reading a book. There's hardly anything in this store. Maybe a few cans of food, a couple bags of chips, and only water in the refrigerators. The whole time, the lady didn't even pick her head up from the book. So I grab a cup of water and some chips. I'm hungry as hell, and there's nothing to eat. So I ask the old lady, "Is this all you have, and where is everybody at?" She told me everybody moved out, and new construction was supposed to begin like 6 months ago, and she didn't say anything after that, so I paid her, walked out, and started walking back towards the truck. The whole time, the dog is still howling. So as I got closer to the church, I looked up the street towards where I heard the howling. I decided to go see for myself why the dog was howling. Houses on both sides of the street are boarded up and dark. I saw a house with the lights on, with about a 5-foot fence. When I looked over the fence, I was in shock. What I saw was a man in his underwear with a chain attached to his neck on all fours, howling. The hairs on my arms and neck stood up as I saw this other man burst through the back door and kick the man on all fours. I was yelling at him to shut up. He ran into a doghouse. I was in shock and turned and ran back down the hill to my truck. As I passed the church, both doors are still wide open, but there are no lights on anymore, and I can still hear the clapping. I finally made it to my truck. I called my supervisor and told him what I saw. I told him to hurry and get here so I could leave. My supervisor asked what exit you were talking about, and I told him, and he said, "Oh, I passed that." He had to turn around and come back to get me. So I'm sitting there, and the rabbit is still hopping around my truck. It stopped and looked up at me as I was sitting in my truck. I'm not saying the rabbit said it, but this is what I heard: "Leave." I rolled up the window and waited for my supervisor, who showed up 5 minutes later. I told my supervisor what happened, and he just laughed at me and told me I'm going to have to drug test you. I did not sleep on that whole trip to Utah until I got to Salt Lake City. Believe it or not, I swear this is what happened. I'm just looking for answers. Me and my friend are driving around in the boonies. It just snowed, so the brights are lighting up a lot around us despite the lack of any lights. Well, we are driving through the woods and such, and we take 2 turns and end up at this really sketchy gas station. We decide to turn around, and we do. We don't have any directions because of a lack of service. So I make sure to keep in mind that we will make 2 lefts to get us back somewhere we are familiar with. We make the first left and keep talking to each other about some stupid shit. Eventually I bring up the fact that we need to make another left, and my friend refutes and claims that there aren't any more turns. We argue about this for a little bit. I never take my eyes off the road, though, as it's slick out and I don't know them well. I'm a pretty anxious driver regardless. While driving, suddenly we take a curve and end up in a small, dimly lit parking lot. We drove in through the only entrance and exit. We are both very fucking confused, and I, like the ass I am, told him I was right and there was another turn. At the end of this small parking lot, there is a huge barbed wire fence. Behind it is a huge building. We didn't really care where we were, but we both knew it was something governmental and we shouldn't be there. So I turned around, and we started back up the twisty road. Although we noticed when driving that there weren't trees lit up from snow on either side of us, it was these huge, clean-cut rock walls, about 150 to 200 feet tall. Neither of us had any memory of this, and we were both actively freaking the fuck out. From our perspective, we were driving straight through the woods, taking a turn, and then ending up there. However, the road now is completely different from before. This was so vastly different, and I received such a weird core feeling I've never experienced before. Just typing this, I'm getting goosebumps again. It was as if both of us were experiencing something for the first time in our lives. There was such a wave of shock and confusion and a weird, overwhelming sense of dread that emerged in me. This lasted about 3 to 5 minutes as we drove through somewhere we'd never been. We expressed our fear that maybe we were lost and that we didn't even know if we were on the same road anymore. We were both wide awake before this due to a mix of energy drinks and a near miss when a deer jumped out on the road about an hour earlier. So for us to have simply zoned out seemed very unlikely. We were also actively talking throughout all of this and the ride down there. Eventually the rock walls subsided, and we passed a gate that led us back into the woods again. It was as if there was a void in our memory. There was a total lack of anything on our first drive down there. Something about it was so concerning. We talked about it for about 30 minutes longer as we drove back, as we were both shaken. I know for a fact that what I've typed doesn't do it justice in any way. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. I really still don't know how to feel about it, but whenever I look back, I get an extreme case of déjà vu, and that doesn't happen to me often. It was just so strange. I looked at the maps later and traced where we went, and I found out it was nothing but a literal dam. Like to stop water and shit. Is there an explanation for what happened? Is there a common physiological answer for why both of us experienced this? I really just want answers. I went back the same way the next day. It went as expected, and everything was normal. I just ended up driving through those rock walls again on the way down and up. It didn't really help me process what happened, and I'm still left clueless as to why both me and my friend seemed to completely black out the first time. Any answers are appreciated, I just want to understand. I live in Oregon. Not quite a rural town, but our town is small and only about a 10-minute drive from what you would actually consider a rural town or area. Everyone's heard about the cryptids and lore of the Oregon woods. I hate these woods. They're just vast and terrifying, but at the same time tempting and beckoning almost. I stay out of the woods. I don't hunt or fish, and I might go hiking once every couple of years with friends, but I make it a point to not go where I don't feel safe. I kind of brushed off all the stories about the woods here until I had an experience of my own, and I'm ready to share what I saw that night. My friend and I work the graveyard shift at a local bakery, and we always carpool. She picks me up at about 11:30 p.m. The bakery itself is in a more rural area, but the main road in town takes us almost all the way out there. It's a well-lit road until you get slightly out of town, and since it's the main road through town, even at night, there are usually passing cars or people walking. From my house, it takes about 10 minutes to get to work using this road. For about 3 months, this road was being repaved. We'd have to stop literally right before the turn into the bakery to wait for the construction crew to finish whatever project they were doing. After 2 nights of being stopped right outside of work for over an hour and an estimated date of construction being done being 3 months out, we decided to start taking the back roads to work. The back way to work was on the opposite side of town from this main road. It took us out of town, around the outskirts of town, and finally to the bakery, for a total of about 30 minutes of travel time instead of 10. This back road was completely surrounded by heavy woods. There was a private drive to a house every 5 miles or so. No street lights, no passing cars, no pedestrians. This road was also extremely curvy. Just constant twists and turns. As expected, we'd see a lot of deer and the occasional possum, squirrel, etc. This particular night, we started our journey through the back roads just as we had been all week. We got about 10 miles through when my friend went around this bend and then suddenly slammed on her brakes. I was on my phone, so I wasn't looking up when she saw it first. I look up, and right in front of the car is this gigantic buck. I'm talking huge. Not moose-sized, but definitely one of the largest bucks I'd ever seen. He was staring directly at us through the windshield. We were just kind of frozen for a moment for some reason. We both looked down at the feet of the deer, and in between its front feet was a dead raccoon. It was clearly a raccoon, its face was pointed toward us, and there were ringlets on the tail. It was basically a stereotypical raccoon. Except this thing was also huge. Now the buck was large, but large bucks aren't unheard of. This raccoon was the size of a huge dog. Like the size of a mastiff. We looked back up at the deer, and it was still staring right at us. It was like it was making eye contact with us both. My friend flashes her high beams and honks the horn at it, hoping to scare it off. It doesn't run off. Without breaking eye contact with us, it starts to walk slowly toward the car. We are both freaked out at this point, and my friend throws the car in reverse, backs up, and swerves around the deer. This entire time, it moves its head to keep eye contact as we back up, pull to the side, and drive away. We look back behind us, and this thing is just standing in the road, staring at us as we drive away. We finally went around a curve, and I lost sight of it, but until then, it never stopped staring right at us. We talk about this a lot and about how weird it was. I didn't think deer ate meat, I'm not a deer expert, I just assumed they were herbivores, so standing over that dead raccoon was the most unsettling part, even over the constant eye contact. Luckily, we weren't dumb enough to get out of the car, but I always wonder what would have happened if we had. Since then, I've been more aware of the lore around here. I've heard unsettling noises and screams coming from the woods, but this was the only actual encounter I think I've had. Am I thinking too much into this, or is it a little weird to anyone else? There are so many legends and stories of cryptids around here, and I'm sure you've all read about the fucked up stuff that happens at Crater Lake. I just thought this might be an interesting encounter for someone to hear. No one else really believes us, but it's hard to believe something you didn't see with your own eyes. Around 10 to 15 years ago, me and a friend were driving down River Road when some winged creature swooped the hood of my car, surrounding and blocking both the windshield and wrapping around the passenger and driver's side windows, and then disappeared. As we're driving, I'm telling her this story about this sleep paralysis demon I saw in a dream. It looks like a winged demon made of molten stone with red eyes, trapped behind a stone prison. It escapes and chases me. It's dark out, maybe 9 to 10 p.m., and as I'm telling this story, we drive under a large willow tree, and something drops out of the sky, or tree, and swoops the hood of my car, filling my entire windshield, wrapping around to my side windows with wings. My friend screams, and I stop the car. I remember it now as an owl with feathery wings, but part of me remembers red eyes, black fleshy wings, and a human face, but I'm not sure if that's just because of what images were all running around in my head when it happened as I was telling the story. There are owls where we were, so I was wondering if maybe that's something owls do, swoop headlights or something, but there are no owls that would be large enough to explain what I saw, just barn owls, and I've seen them before. I thought I'd ask around if anyone else had ever experienced something like this, as it's always bothered me, and my friend is sick of me asking her what she remembers. She just says it was weird, and she was too scared and closed her eyes. Has anyone else had an owl or large bird swoop into their car hood? Is there a cryptid matching this description or something that swoops cars? Anything would help. Me and my wife work in television, and it requires a lot of traveling and a lot of late-night car rides. We live in Florida, and my wife had to go to Georgia for work. Because we take so many plane rides, we sometimes decide when it's 4 to 7 hours that we'll drive. Believe me, after 20 plus years of planes, being able to drive every once in a while is a blessing because you get so fed up with sitting in planes. It's about 11:30 p.m. when her brother texts me to pick up the phone when she calls, which I thought was odd because why would I not pick up? As soon as I'm reading the text, I get a frantic phone call from my wife. Now please understand that my wife doesn't subscribe to any cryptid or paranormal stuff. I, however, most certainly do, so for her to be this freaked out and panicked means something crazy went down. She starts talking really fast, and I can't understand any of what she's telling me. So eventually, I tell her to calm down and tell me what is going on. She starts telling me, I've seen one of those things you sometimes talk about, the documentary thing. Still kind of puzzled, I ask her, what docu-thing exactly? She replies, the wolf thing, the human wolf. Dogman? Yes. She's driving down from Georgia and is at this point 2 hours removed from our house, and we are located just above Tampa, so she's already driving in Florida, but she's driving down this 45-mile-per-hour road to give you an idea of the road itself, so not a big or broad road. As she's making a turn, her lights hit. At that moment, she thinks of a man standing bent over on the side of the road. She figures that's really odd because who would be standing in the middle of the night on a small, not lit road? Then, as the light is hitting it more and more, she realizes that there's something off here as the light is climbing up as she gets closer, revealing that the arms are completely covered in hair, and as it's reaching to pick up something off the ground, she also sees massive hands. Then, when it's fully lit, this thing is hunched over, is already standing at 7 feet, and starts to move up. She sees a complete canine head with ears pointed backwards. She tells me that everything, despite going pretty fast, is slowing down for her so that her brain can make sense of it. She tells me it has really long, thin arms, very muscular though, short fur with longer fur at the back and neck and where the thighs meet. By the time she passes it, it almost stands up completely and has not once looked in her direction or acknowledged the car or the light, and it is as if this thing doesn't really care. She tells me that she was on the phone with her brother when she saw this thing, and she started screaming when she saw it, causing her brother to also freak out and ask her what was going on and what she's seeing, which is when she rambles onto him and tells him she's got to call me. After she tells me the story, I calm her down, tell her not to get out of the car anymore till she gets home, and ask her if she has enough gas to make it without stopping at a gas station, which she does. She carries a firearm on her, but there was no way she was going to stand a chance against this thing if she decided to go for the car. We talk a bit, as I can tell she's in shock, and she tells me that she's trying to make sense of it. Roughly about 6 years ago, I and 2 of my friends went off-roading in my friend Alan's truck somewhere in Manchester, New Jersey. We met with a bunch of Alan's off-road buddies in a spot they frequented, hung out for a few hours, drove around the dirt trails, and just had a good time socializing with other people. I did not have any alcohol or any pot in my system because after we left I had to drive myself home, so I was sober along with my Alan, who was also sober, but my friend Chris was a bit high. We were beginning to leave, and as we were taking the trails to get back to the main road, my friend Alan told me to help look out for deer. He was driving about 35 miles per hour because the dirt path we were on was pretty open, about 30-ish feet wide, and we were dead in the middle in case he did have to respond to a deer jumping out of the tree line. A few minutes go by, and my sharp eyes spot a deer running along the side of the truck, but within the tree line, so the view of it wasn't more than a dark brown patch of fur. As I'm about to say something to my friend Alan, thinking that this deer is going to run in front of the car and try to commit suicide, it speeds up its pace significantly, gets about 20 feet ahead of the truck still in the tree line, and then proceeds to jump out in front of the truck. For as long as I live, I will never forget what I saw that night. It ran onto its 2 back legs, looked right up at us, and to our horror, it ran by this about 30-foot wide dirt road in 2 to 3 steps and went into the opposite tree line. In those few seconds, I saw this dog man or wolf man, and to this day, I cannot forget what I saw. It was roughly 7 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur. Every inch of its body I saw was covered in this dark brown fur, but the chest/stomach area had less fur and a lighter colored fur than the rest of the body, but even under all this fur, you could make out extreme muscle definition, very similar to an Olympic bodybuilder. It also had a canine type head with a long snout, 2 distinct perked up wolf ears, and large muscular legs. The torso and arms were similar to those of a very muscular man with large hands. The hands had visible claws that looked like they could do some real damage, and its eyes reflected an unnatural color of light that I haven't seen in the animal kingdom. As soon as it jumped into the opposing tree line, my friend Alan slammed on the brakes, and my friend Chris said, "I know I'm high, but what the actual fuck was that?" My friends, puzzled by what we just saw, look at me and go, "Okay, nature, boy, please tell us that was something explainable." I sat there dumbfounded and told them I did not have an answer based on reason, science, or anything else I could logically think of, and my friend Alan hightailed it out of there. To this day, my friend Chris has convinced himself that it wasn't a hallucination because of the pot, and my other friend Alan, who does not believe in the supernatural and absolutely refuses to have an open mind, does not speak about this event and pretends it didn't happen. To this day, I still have no logical explanation for what I saw. I do not believe that a bipedal canine creature could logically or biologically exist, but what I saw was something matching that description with my own eyes, and it is very real. I've always been considered a calm, rational, and logical person. When it came to the paranormal, I was always on the fence, until this day occurred. This incident took place about 4 years ago, in August 2016. I'm driving to meet with my girlfriend and get food. I'll never forget glancing at the clock to notice that the time was past 8:30 p.m., with the sun beginning to set. Once I've picked her up, against my better nature, I stupidly decide to take a shortcut through a notoriously haunted road. This road is situated between a huge cemetery and crematorium. 2 people died in a car crash here, and I also have family buried in the cemetery. There's 2 A-joined stretches of roads, Forge Lane and Park Lane, which were national speed limit roads. This means you're legal to drive up to speeds of 60 miles per hour in the UK. Limits on these roads have since changed and been lowered. These roads have 0 street lights. The only form of lights are the small cat eye reflectors that's built into the middle of the road to reflect car headlights and show the path. Lastly, there are no pavements or sidewalks on these roads, all important for later. I'm focused, alert, and cautiously driving at a high speed, so I'm therefore in tune with my surroundings. We continue moving along and quickly reach halfway between these 2 connected roads, where the trees on each side of the road form a tunnel, which only added to the eeriness. Towards the end of the tunnel, I spot a masculine figure suddenly in the distance up ahead. As any sane driver would do, I instinctively take my foot off the accelerator or gas before realizing that there are no pavements or sidewalks for pedestrians to walk on. And it's a 60-mile-per-hour road. My mind goes into overdrive. At the same time, I feel a massive flood of emotions and an impending sense of dread begin to creep in. But I remind myself to remain calm while driving on this dangerous, unlit road. My emotions are running wild, my hands are shaking. Tears are rolling down my face, and I'm beginning to sweat profusely. As I get closer, I can finally make out more detail. I'm in a state of complete shock and disbelief at what's in front of me. I see a hooded, brown-robed figure. No face. No feet. He is literally in the middle of the road, hovering. Then, almost as if he sensed that I was coming closer, now less than 10 yards and within range of hitting him, he drifts to the side of the road, into some nearby bushes, and then completely vanishes. I barely maintained my composure long enough to drive to the end of the road, where I used about 1 to 1.5 acres for the house and yard. They had a large, dense pine forest area all around their house. Except for the road to it, there was forest for miles around. They had cut down some trees to make 4-wheeler paths that we could ride on when we went up there. One day, my sister and I were riding out on the paths on some of my grandparents' 4-wheelers. For whatever reason, I think it was to get a drink, but I don't entirely remember, my sister went inside. I thought nothing of it and kept riding the 4-wheeler I was on. Well, about 3 minutes later, I was driving past a really dense patch of the forest. Over the 4-wheeler engine, I heard a loud growl. I heard it clearly to my left in the patch of forest. Thinking it was just a coyote, I looked over towards where I heard the growl. I did not see a coyote. You know that feeling when you look into a forest at night and you get scared something will stare back at you? Well, this happened to me in the middle of the day. What I was looking at still haunts me to this day. I was staring into 2 large, yellow eyes. It appeared that they were sunken into the creature's face. The eyes were probably about 1.75 times the size of a normal human eye, and they were watching me. I could see by looking at the eyes alone that this was a smart creature. I didn't get to see what it was because it was standing in a bush. This bush was very large, probably about 10 feet tall. About 8 feet up, this bush is where I saw these eyes. I couldn't see any other part of this creature, but I didn't stick around to find out what it was. I put the 4-wheeler into drive and sped up to about 55 to 60 miles per hour. I ran inside and did not go back out on the paths for the rest of the trip. No one else in my family saw anything, but I was terrified of whatever it was. Fast forward 6 years, and it is this year. I was talking with my friend about spooky things we had seen. I told him about this story and began to wonder what I could possibly have seen. I did a lot of research on what large predatory animals live up there. It is northern Idaho if you don't believe me and want to go check. After doing a little bit of digging, I found that there were no animals that were 8 feet tall. I didn't believe it because I was skeptical of anything that was paranormal. I checked again and again because I didn't want to believe it was something that no one had ever captured or been able to prove existed. The largest wolf ever found would have only been 6 feet tall when standing on its hind legs. The largest bear might have been large enough, but it could not have fit in that bush. So I began to research any possible creature that it could have been. Eventually, I found one. A wendigo. It was the only possible creature I could have seen. I don't know why it didn't attack me or why it let me get away. Based on the features I saw, the large, yellow, sunken eyes, it could have only been a wendigo. What scared me even more is that a couple years later, my grandparents moved out of that house for an unknown reason. They say it was to be closer to the family, but the family was fine, making a long drive and coming up very often. They moved only a little bit closer. It is still a long drive. This happened to my cousin, who shall remain nameless, one night in the summer of 2004. At the time, he was maybe 28 years old and a policeman for the reservation. He often worked graveyards and would end his shifts by stopping at our house to make sure we were okay. The night this happened, he was working in a graveyard and, of course, was required to patrol the dirt road. He had never had any problems with this before. Growing up within the reservation and hearing the strange stories people told of the hanging trees, he was wary but considered himself a tough guy. What happened that night has definitely made an impression on him. He was nearing the end of his shift, so he began the slow 2-mile drive down the terribly dark dirt road. Everything seemed fine until he got to the trees. At the entrance to one of the small trails that leads from the main part of the dirt road down deep into the trees, there was a German Shepherd dog. Just sitting as if it were guarding the trail. My cousin thought nothing of this at first, seeing as how the rescue dogs roamed freely. He pulled up to it in his patrol car to see if he recognized the dog. When he rolled down the passenger side window, the dog locked its gaze on him and just stared. My cousin immediately felt an ominous presence. As if he were in danger. Something about the dog made him very uncomfortable. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, so he rolled up his window and started driving again. A few minutes passed, and my cousin began hearing a scratching and thumping noise. He listened while trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. When he realized where it was and what was making the noise, he said his heart sank. He looked in his rearview mirror and saw it. It was the German Shepherd dog he had come across just minutes ago. It was running behind his patrol car. Running on its hind legs and clawing and scratching at the back of his car, like it was attempting to climb onto the back. The dog was snarling and baring its teeth. Its eyes were deep, empty black pits in its skull. My cousin had never felt such fear in his life up until that moment. He sped up, hoping to outrun her and leave the dog behind. But it was of no use. The demon dog kept pace with the car, going at least 45 miles per hour. It kept clawing and scratching at the car, trying to pull itself on. My cousin was panicking. There was nothing he could do except keep driving and try to lose the dog. He pulled out his gun and attempted to scare the demon beast away by firing a shot outside of his driver's window. It had no effect. The demon dog kept with the car. My cousin let me speed down the dirt road until my house came into view. He floored it and hauled ass to my house. The dog kept with him. My cousin looked at him in the rearview mirror again. The dog's snout had begun to rot away, exposing bone. Its eyes were empty pits sunken into its skull, and it had pulled itself onto the back of the car. It was glaring into the back window and trying to claw its way in. My cousin swerved all over the road, trying to get the now dead dog off of the car. Nothing worked, so he decided to continue toward my house. He was desperate to get off the dirt road and to get to my house so that maybe, just maybe, I would be able to help him in some way. He made it. He said that as soon as he left the dirt road, the demon dog vanished. He came to my house, ran to my front door, and was knocking frantically. I answered, let him in, and calmed him down enough for him to recount this story to me. He stayed at my house with me, and we sat awake talking until the sun came up. Once it was light enough, we went outside to inspect his car. The back of it was completely torn up. The back window was cracked, and there were pieces of what looked to be black fur stuck to the car. There were faint impressions of paw prints that looked to be burned into the car's paint. We were speechless. My cousin quit his job that day and hasn't gone back onto that dirt road since. I haven't gone on the dirt road again either. I don't even go outside at night anymore. I have an 8-year-old son now. I've told him this story, and I am sure that he knows there is more to this world than meets the eye. He does not go outside by himself. Day or night. The name of this road is Lick Road, in Cincinnati, Ohio. A group of my friends and I went to Lick Road while we were in high school. The story of this road is that a girl named Amy, no one knows if this is the actual name of the girl, has been assaulted and killed at the end of the road. People get the name Amy from a sign that was sprayed on a sign in reflective paint next to the road. So the name Amy took off. Anyhow, she supposedly haunts the road, looking for help. We get to said road around 11:30 p.m., and of course there is patchy fog down the whole road, which puts everyone on edge already. The road is somewhat long, with private-owned land at the end of it. Where you sit is kind of a dirt turnaround kind of thing with a gate at the other end. The good stuff happens on the other side of that gate, of course. So we split into 2 groups of 3. 3 sit by the car and try to get evidence there, while the other group of 3, me included, go past the gate. Past the gate is a dirt path that takes you to a small bridge, where the body was dumped. We all had flashlights, recorders, and cameras, just regular snap cameras. We get a few feet into the path, and the first thing that happens is that my sun flashlight, which stays charged for 5 to 6 hours, dies. Yes, I charged all the way and even charged it right before we left, just in case. It just freaking died and didn't come back on till I plugged it back up at home. Then the creepiest thing happened to me, and only me, for some reason. I saw a face above an 8 or 9 foot tree. No eyes or mouth, they were just gone. I turn away to make sure my mind isn't playing with me. I looked back, expecting maybe the moon or something, but there was nothing. So I kept to myself, not sure if I was tripping. We keep going until we get to the bridge. Dead quiet. Nothing. You could barely hear the water underneath the bridge. So me and my friend Jay go onto the bridge to try and get some pictures. I thought he was behind me the whole time. It turns out he never went as far as I did. I feel breath on the back of my neck. I tell Jay to stop messing around. I look behind me and see him at the beginning of the bridge. I had a minor freak out and went back to him. While we were doing the top of the bridge, my other friend P went underneath it. We all get scared when he comes hauling ass back up the hill, saying he saw a shadow figure in the woods. So we book it back to the car. While we're running back, we hear sets of footsteps running past us, and all 3 of us see 3 huge shadow figures running through the woods beside us. They darted past us in almost a blur, but we were slow enough to see them individually. They haul asses through the woods, and thankfully, that's the last we saw of them. We get back to the car and start to leave, only to figure out that there is help written everywhere. The 3 by the car store didn't do it, but we all hear footsteps outside the car but don't see anyone, so we just booked it back to the UDF that's around the corner to sort of calm down and share our experiences. No one saw or felt anything like I did. We also think whatever was out there followed us home because we all awoke at the same time of 3ish in the morning. Our clocks were flashing, and the power didn't go out. My friend Aaron and I were joyriding in the rain when we decided we wanted to do something fun. Urban exploration was already something we loved doing. He told me a story his grandparents had told him. They told the story of an abandoned mental hospital called Questhaven. Today there is a religious retreat with the same name on the road that it's supposed to be on, but you can't miss the road, or so we thought. We drove around San Marcos, looking for it. It was 11 p.m., and Aaron's grandparents were asleep. Neither of us had phones with maps at the time, so we were doing this pretty blind. He kept driving while I looked at my contacts on my phone, trying to think of someone who might know. He suddenly said, "Maybe Kelly would know." I dial Kelly at midnight at this point, and she answers the phone. Not only does she know where it is, she lives just off of Elfin Forest Road, which is how you get to Questhaven. We ask if Kelly wants to join, but she has class in the morning and was about to go to sleep. We make our way to San Elijo, which, at the time, was far less developed than it is today. We go from the well-lit, suburban landscape that is North San Diego County to a long, surprisingly dark road. We enter San Elijo Hills, where the suburbia is just spreading. It's now raining, and it's somewhat foggy. Up ahead is Elfin Forest Road. We make a right onto the road and are instantly struck by how dark it is ahead of us. Elfin Forest Road has no street lights, sidewalks, or bike lanes. It's semi-rural, in the middle of multiple very rural areas. We had no idea something like this could be tucked away in the area. We drove down the winding road, with the rain and fog making it rather hard to see at first. Kelly told us if we hit the four-way stop, we'd gone too far. With the weather conditions, it was rather hard for us to see what was going on, so we actually passed Questhaven a couple of times. I spotted the egg farm sign, the house for sale, and the few Elfin Forest signs dotted around. I even noticed a hole in the fence, which I will get to in another post. Yes, we did eventually wander through it into an abandoned trailer park. But we didn't actually notice Questhaven Road until the weather cleared up a bit. Aaron and I commented on how we felt like dumbasses for missing it until 1 a.m. we made a left onto the road. We pass a mess of mangled mailboxes and eventually reach the end of the road. There's a motion sensor light and many signs that say no parking. I paid for the gas that night, and I was hellbent on finishing the adventure. There's a fence that clearly leads to a trail. I assumed the asylum was somewhere on the other end of the trail. He didn't want to risk getting his car towed. I was arguing that if we stopped, got out of our cars, and hauled asses on the trail, It would take a tow truck at least 20 minutes to get there. Well, we argued for 20 minutes, so I finally got back in the car, slightly damp. It was still raining, just not as heavily. We continue arguing and get up to the T-shaped intersection, where we will turn back onto Elfin Forest Road. As we're arguing, I have a pretty bad temper, my eyes focus on something past Aaron's face, and I go dead silent and wide-eyed. He notices and looks to his left to see what I'm focused on. The for sale sign we passed multiple times is now unhinged on one side. It is moving very slowly, back and forth, a rather strikingly large distance, being held perfectly in alignment with the wooden pole. We didn't lose momentum for the entire solid minute we looked at it. The wind could not do that. The sign can be viewed on the 2007 Street View. You might have to activate the option to look at older versions of the Street View. I said, "Does that look off to you?" And Aaron said, "Fuck that, we're out of here." I said, "That works. I'm down." We're heading down Elfin Forest Road, both silent. Then, on the side of the road, I see it. A woman hunched over, leaning slightly forward. Glowing. Nightgown. She leans forward slightly, and just as we drive up, she jumps in front of the car. She disappears, turning into a mist that flows over the top of the passenger side, where I was sitting. We tense up. If you've ever seen a Miyazaki film, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, etc., and you see the characters tense up and their hair kind of float in the air for a moment, that was exactly what it felt like we were doing. After a long pause, I break the silence. "Did you see that?" He spoke over me. "No, I did not see it. I did not just see shit." I say, "Okay, stop. Don't say anything else. We're going to ask each other questions to make sure we know what we just saw. Don't spout out a lot of details, just answer the question. I'll go first. What did IT do?" I emphasized IT so he would know not to assign it an identity yet. He said, "It jumped in front of the car." "What shape was it?" I said, "Human." "It looked human." "What gender was it?" He responded, "Female." "What color was it?" I said, "Glowing, semi-transparent, slightly blue." "What was she wearing?" He said, "It looked like a dress, a nightgown, something that flows." "How old did she look?" I said, "Hard to tell, maybe 20s 30s? Maybe 40s? We got quiet again. A couple of minutes passed, and Aaron almost chuckled again. We just saw a ghost. That was our first paranormal event that happened in Elfin Forest. Soon, it became a somewhat regular thing. I still go there from time to time, and there were many other strange events that happened there with many other people. I would like to cover them here. So about a year ago, my husband, me, and his family lived on this property in the cute little house that was on it. Now I need to give a little bit of background on this house, the property, and the houses near us. This house had been empty for about 6 years before we moved in, and it sat on 13 acres of land. It was a very cute farmhouse that sat right off of a long road that led out of the city I live in. Now, the road we had to drive on to get to our house is a 12-mile, windy road that goes through the outer hills of our city. Basically, when you're on the toad, you go through lots of fields of sagebrush and farmland. Normally, this was a very peaceful drive. There really wasn't anyone that drove on that road when we would go into town. One day, everyone was out of our house. It was me, my husband, his younger brother, his wife, and their mom and dad, and we were all in separate cars. Basically, the couples were all together doing their own things. We had our nephew at home, which is important for later on. My husband and I were driving home around 6 or 7, so it was pretty dark out but not pitch black. Before you hit the 12 miles of road, there's this little gas station that we go to a lot. Once we passed that gas station, though, things got really weird for us. I was the passenger in the car, and we were listening to music, but for some reason everything around us got a weird feeling. The car was warm, but as soon as we entered the 12-mile road, it got very cold in the car. It felt like something was very off. I felt it but didn't say anything, but I was very uneasy. Me and my husband both went very quiet and stayed like that for about 5 minutes before my husband looked at me and said that he felt weird, as if he were in a trance while driving. He then told me that it was cold in the car, and he felt like we were being watched, even though we were the only cars on that road. We both kind of shook it off and decided to ignore whatever was going on, even though the feeling just wouldn't go away. Well, my husband and I got home, and we were the first ones to make it home. As soon as we walked through the door, my nephew looked at us and told us the house was haunted, which we all knew, because the doors kept opening and closing while we were gone. About 5 minutes after we got home, my husband's brother, whom we will call Bob, and his wife, whom we will call Susan, got home. They both walked in the door and looked at us with the most shocked look on their faces. They proceeded to tell us that when they got onto the 12-mile road, they felt like something was off. Like they were in some sort of trance, everything looked the same but felt so different. They said their car got really cold, and they felt like they were being watched. According to them, they were driving for about 15 minutes before they saw another car, and it had just appeared. It was a big red Tahoe, which creeped them out because we had one that looked identical to this one, but they said the back doors had some weird kind of lock on them. They followed this car for maybe 5 minutes before it turned off onto a toad that led to a building that no one had been using the whole time we lived out there. Susan said that she floored it the rest of the way home because things just seemed off and wrong. Then, when they got home and parked, they said they felt like something was watching them from the empty field across the street. By now, it was dark, and they didn't see anyone or anything, but they were both terrified and ran to the house as fast as they could. As they were telling us this, the dogs we had outside, a Malamute Lab mix and 2 Pyrenees and Shepherd mixes about 6 months old, started to bark and freak out. My stomach dropped, and we all looked at each other like, what the fuck? And I ran to Bob's room. Then all of a sudden we heard our front door open, and a few seconds later, maybe 30 seconds, the 3 dogs came walking in, and we couldn't get them back outside. Now that was weird for them because we kept the house really warm, and they loved the cold and snow and rarely would come inside and would immediately go back outside. So we were all fairly freaked out and went into my brother-in-law's room to sit. Honestly, none of us knew what to do. My husband has a gun, and we have some pretty big dogs, but even with all that protection, we were still scared. To me, it was like whatever it was wasn't a physical thing that was making us freak out. Even our dogs were scared. One of them kept looking at a specific wall and shaking, and he would run over to us and hide them, then go look at it again. The outside dogs refused to go outside, and most of the dogs were hiding. The house felt wrong, but we couldn't put our finger on why exactly it felt that way. When their parents got home, we asked them how their drive home was. We didn't immediately say anything just to see if they had also experienced it, and they said that it didn't feel right, like something was wrong and it was just too cold in the car. Specifically the back. Even to this day, we still don't fully know what caused things to feel so weird that night. The next morning, while I was at work, a customer told me that she had experienced something similar, the weird or something being off feeling, but not for as long. We were all just recently talking about this, and we all agreed that the road seemed like it was the road we always drove to get home, but that it felt different. Something wasn't quite right about the road and the scenery around us. My husband described it as feeling like we were in a reality similar to our own but different enough for us to tell. My sister-in-law thinks that maybe the car they had seen was something weird. It's gone between a killer and the victim trying to communicate and it being a ghost car since it really just disappeared. All we know is that we all felt off, and we all said it seemed like there was something. The back seat of our cars. I'm going to start off by saying that this is a fairly recent phenomenon. My first sighting was at the end of December 2017, and the other just last week. I'm a 17-year-old girl living in a small town in southern Vermont called Springfield. My house is situated on the outside edge of town, nestled in a medium-sized patch of forest. My family owns a pig farm, with only a small fraction of our farm actually being on my house's property. We also have 2 dwarf goats, 4 dogs, and an old pet turkey. Now, getting into the first sighting, I remember it being a little past 8 p.m., so it was well past dark. I was outside at the time, heading back to the house after tossing some garbage in the dumpster. The dumpster was situated just in front of the garage or barn, about 40 yards from the house. So about 10 feet from the door, a loud sound catches my attention, making me freeze and turn. I had my headphones on at the time, which goes to show just how loud it was. I turned just in time to see something skinny and humanoid, pale gray in color. It jumped from the ground to the roof of the garage before quickly crawling to the other side, where I could no longer see it. Spooked, I hurried back inside, texting my best friend Dee about what I had just seen. Like me, had seen odd things, and has had paranormal experiences before, so I knew she would believe me. She was creeped out about it as well, telling me to be careful. The second sighting was much more terrifying. It was late and dark again, and I was outside with my dog. To my back was a pathway of sorts that led to the backyard, and beyond that, the woods. The path is big enough for vehicles to drive down, and it's not that long of a path. To my right at that moment was a steep drop-off full of trees, with the main road at the end of the drop-off. While waiting for my dog to do his business, I was looking up at the night sky, wishing he'd hurry because I was freezing. A loud growl from him makes me look down. He's very timid for a dog of his breed, which is why the growl surprised me. He was staring at something behind me, his fur on end. His ears were flat against his head, and he was snarling at whatever was behind me. Instantly nervous, I slowly turned, my flashlight's beam landing right on whatever it was. My heart jumped up into my throat, and I couldn't move. This thing had to have been what had jumped into the garage roof a few weeks prior. It was crouched down on all fours, almost skeletally thin, covered in short, whitish fur, and staring right at me. Its face reminded me of a bobcat skull, but much larger. Its lower jaw stuck out in front of its top, its eyes empty sockets. It also had darkly colored antlers sprouting from its head. I could see that its hands, yes, hands, were thin as well, and the fingers ended in sharp black claws. I couldn't see its feet, as its back legs were partially hidden by a snowbank. We stared at each other for nearly a minute, my dog now cowering behind my legs. It suddenly let out a shriek that, if I were asked to describe it, sounded like a mix between an injured pig's scream and a woman's scream. The volume of it made me cringe with discomfort. It hisses at me before leaping down into the drop-off, branches snapping. I immediately unfreezed, running inside and slamming the door. I felt safer inside, where all our guns were. I once again told Dee, and it took me a few days to do so, but I drew out the creature. The longer I look at it, the more I believe it was a wendigo. Just before 9:15 p.m. last night, I turned right from a two-lane road to go eastbound on another two-lane road in Long Beach, California, in a semi-residential and semi-rural park area. Both of these roads have speed limits of 40 to 45 miles per hour. The road I turned on makes two little curves before it goes over the San Gabriel River, and as I came around the first curve, I noticed something in the median. This patch of road is not very well lit as it is surrounded by a large park on both sides, so my headlights were what helped me see this thing. My car was really the only one around. In the median was a figure that looked like a woman, although I'm not 100% sure it was a woman since I was driving by at about 40 miles per hour. As I got closer, I noticed this figure holding something. I realized that it was holding a huge tree branch. I don't mean a small twig with a few leaves. The branch was really thick, with other smaller branches coming out with tons of leaves, partially obscuring this figure. It was facing southwest, towards me, while holding this massive branch downward in front of itself. The branch did not extend into the left lane that I was in, but the leaves still made it massive. I could see through the leaves a bit that this figure seemed to have some kind of white shirt on, but I don't know if it was a gown, t-shirt, dress, or sweater. I tried to look back at it after I had passed, but I could barely make anything out. There is also a chain-link fence in the middle of the median, which is concrete with no vegetation growing, so that people can't just cross from one side of the road to the other. This person or figure would have had to walk across the south side of the road with the massive branch to get to the median. I have no idea why someone would just stand on the median with really nowhere else to go with a massive tree branch at that time of night. I'm really not sure how this figure could have gotten a branch, let alone a branch that large and thick. The road is surrounded by a large park on both sides of it, which has dozens of tall trees. There hasn't been any crazy wind recently in the area, so I find it hard to believe why someone could just get a branch that big, and why would they be holding it? I can't explain the identity of what I saw. I know that there was an indigenous tribe, Puvungna, that lived in the area hundreds of years ago. I don't know if this was a ghost or just a strange homeless person. The particular area is not well known for homelessness. I'm open to many possibilities. Either way, seeing this freaked me out quite a bit. I've never had anything really unexplainable like that happen to me before. Any explanations are welcome. My first experience was on May 27, 2016. The only reason I remember this day is because it was my best friend's birthday. I'm not really sure what time it was, but it had been dark for a couple of hours. I was pretty young around this time, like 13, so my memory is a bit fuzzy surrounding this experience. My friend had a birthday party that I was attending, and I planned on staying the night. It was just him and another friend, and I stayed the night. Shortly after everyone else left, my friend's older brother started telling us about a monster in the woods at Hopkins Park. We didn't really believe him, but he seemed to believe it, at least. Eventually, he offered to drive us up to the park, go through the woods, and prove it to us. Being young kids who had never experienced being somewhere like that unsupervised at night, we eagerly jumped at the chance. We all piled in his little car, and we went to the park. It was like a 10-minute drive, but it went by so fast. We didn't really act excited or anything, but I could tell that we all had the same excitement going on internally. We got to the park, and he parked in the gravel lot. Strangely, there was another car there. We didn't think much of it, but in hindsight, we should have realized that something was up. We got out of the car, and my friend pulled out a flashlight. His older brother almost immediately snatched it out of his hands, claiming that since he was the oldest one, He got to use the flashlight, or something like that. After that, we headed straight for some specific path through the woods. Again, this should have seemed suspicious, but we were kids who were just excited to be there. Not long after entering, the flashlight started to flicker and eventually turn off. Again, pretty suspicious. Shortly after that, we heard something walking towards us from the woods. We all froze. It sounded like it stopped right behind us. Then, at the same time, my best friend and I both felt a hand on our shoulders. We both screamed and ran out while hearing his brother laugh. It turns out that the hand we felt belonged to the older brother's friend, who was in a black morph suit. We felt really dumb forever, even believing that there was something in the woods, and the older brother and his friend continued to laugh. While they were laughing, we heard this weird howl come from the woods. They froze, but we assumed it was just another prank on their end. They looked mortified, but I and my two friends figured it was another one of their friends in the woods trying to prank us again. Not wanting them to get the pleasure of pranking us again, we headed towards the sound. They tried to stop us, claiming that it wasn't them, but we didn't buy it. We trekked through the woods, and we heard the sound once again, but it was much closer this time around. We stopped and looked around, trying to adjust our eyes to our surroundings. I felt a hand on my chest at one point, trying to get my attention. I soon realized what he saw. It was a pair of these glowing orange eyes, easily 10 feet off the ground. We didn't freeze this time, we ran. We found the older brother and his friend, and they didn't believe our experience. They just assumed that it was our attempt to get back at them, but that was simply not the case. We then went back to my friend's house. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I would close my eyes, I would see those eyes. As time went on, this memory faded from my mind. I somehow seemingly forgot that this encounter had even taken place. I think I may have suppressed the memory to keep my sanity. Fast forward a few years, and I am 15. I am not sure about the date on this one, but it was a weekend in June of 2018. My friends and I would ride bikes all around Brunswick, even late at night. Brunswick is a quiet city where you don't need to worry about being out late at night. It's a really safe place, so our parents weren't concerned about us being out late at night. On this particular night, we wanted to go to the playground attached to the school across the street from Hopkins Park. Applewood Elementary, I think it's called. It has this really big blue sign that lights up at night and partially illuminates the area surrounding it. We made it to the park and just hung out on the playground equipment, talking about random stuff. It's also worth mentioning that it was pretty foggy that night, which gave everything an ominous feel. It was pretty cool, actually. The fog around the school was seemingly blue, and that was pretty interesting. Not long after, we became disinterested in what we were doing and eventually decided on visiting Hopkins Park. There's a pavilion at the center of the park, so we headed there. We sat on the benches and talked for a bit until we eventually heard a sound coming from the woods. At this moment, I immediately remembered my experience from years earlier. I was mortified. My friends wanted to check it out, but I pleaded with them not to. They then made jokes about me being a baby or whatever, and they somehow persuaded me to go check it out with them. We entered the woods, and we didn't notice much at first. The screeching stopped as we grew closer. I am not sure why, but this made me even more anxious than I already was. One of my friends wanted to investigate further, so he went off the path and into the dense woods in the direction of where the sound was coming from. We all listened intently as he carelessly trudged through the woods. His footsteps abruptly stopped, and seconds later, we heard him scream. We all jumped but didn't really move much from where we were. I wanted to go, but my other friends were not going to let that happen. We then saw our friend dash out of the woods, nearly tripping over his own feet. We were too focused on him to notice that something was following him. Soon, we saw the same glowing eyes that I had seen before. It towered over us. It then let out a terrifying screech, a sound like one that would be made in agony. We ran out of the park, leaving our bikes behind. We ended up going to a friend's house, who was not with us that night, that lived kind of close to Applewood. His parents were pretty cool, and they offered to drive us all home. In the morning, I had to ask my mom to drive me up to the park to get my bike. Naturally, she asked me why I left my bike there. I am not sure why, but I gave my mom the actual story of what happened. Somehow, she actually believed me. She then told me all about the Hopkins monster, how she didn't encounter it, but she knew plenty of people who did. How are deer corpses found twisted up in the woods with no signs of them being eaten? How are the police always there at night for some reason? This really stuck with me. My mom is not one to believe in things like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster, but she seemed dead set on the existence of this monster. My next encounter was on October 25, 2019. It was a few days before Halloween, and my friends and I were really into the holiday. We always liked Halloween, but this year was different. We all knew that this would be our last real Halloween as kids. I mean, we were all in high school and were admittedly a bit too old for trick-or-treating, but we still decided to go one last time. With this in mind, we wanted to make the most of the month. We spent a lot of time in the woods of our city, hanging out and doing whatever it is that teenagers do. Something about the chilly wind and the colorful leaves made being in the woods pretty special. On this particular day, we went to the woods of Hopkins Park after school. The last encounter I had was still in the back of my mind, but I figured nothing would happen while I was there during the day, and I was right. That day was pretty normal. Mundane, even. If you've been in the woods during the fall, you've been at Hopkins Park during the fall. We ventured sort of deep into the woods, and it quickly became pretty dense. Soon, we all began to smell an incredibly foul stench. Honestly, I have never smelled anything quite as gross as I did that day. It was my best guess as to what a rotting corpse would smell like, and I was sort of right. We walked in the direction of the smell, and we found a deer corpse. I've never seen a dead deer up close before, so it was a strange experience. On top of that, its body was twisted up in a strange way. Almost unnaturally, even. I then realized that it hadn't been touched by any predatory animals, as far as I could tell. I then remembered the conversation I had with my mom about a year earlier. I told my friends about that, and only one of them had ever heard of there being a monster at the park before. We all agreed to come back that night to investigate. I was a bit braver this time around, I suppose. We met up at about 11 o'clock that night at the pavilion. We spent about an hour in the woods, to no avail. We expected to find this creature almost immediately, but that was simply not the case. We pretty much gave up, and at this point, I began to doubt my own experiences. We were about to leave when one of my friends went into the woods to pee. Obviously, he went alone. We all waited for him to finish up before leaving, and we talked while standing around. Suddenly, we heard him fall over and let out a little shout. Right after, we heard a howl from what we could only assume was the monster that dwells within the woods. Then our friend ran out of the woods, moving faster than I've ever seen him run. He had mud on his jeans and what I assumed to be his own piss on his shirt and pants. We followed him as he ran out of the park, all of us terrified. We tried to figure out exactly what he saw, but he wasn't able to really convey anything worthwhile. Truthfully, I am not sure he even knows what he saw. Regardless, it really left an impact on him, and he seemed really paranoid for the next few weeks. He didn't even come trick-or-treating with us, which was very unlike him. We would talk to others about this experience, and rarely would they believe us. I certainly understand why they didn't. A few months later, someone suggested that we get a picture of the creature to prove its existence. It was the beginning of winter at this point, so theoretically, it would be easy to get a picture of the monster as it could not hide behind leaves of trees. Unfortunately, it wasn't snowing a lot around this time, but if it was, that would be even better, as the white snow could contrast against its slick black body. Only one of my friends from the last encounter was willing to go with me to try getting a picture, but that was much better than going alone. This was my final encounter, and it took place on December 14, 2019. I don't remember the time we were there, but it was past midnight. We ventured into the woods with our phones out, ready to take a picture. We didn't find anything, but we did hear a sound, which we think was caused by it. After hearing that, we eagerly went in the direction of the sound. Unfortunately, we couldn't find it. It was at this point that I started feeling watched. In hindsight, this could have just been paranoia setting in, which would have been expected. We kept going through the woods, and as time went on, we both started seeing stuff out of the corners of our eyes. At first, it was minor things, like trees moving abnormally, but then it evolved into seeing glowing eyes or even the shape of the creature. The uneasiness we felt began to grow to the point where we felt the need to leave. We were disappointed that we didn't see it, but relieved to finally leave. We put our phones away and headed towards the exit of the woods. Just as we exited the woods, we heard something run towards us. We instinctively ran, and I thought to pull my phone out. Looking behind me as I ran. As I was driving home a few days ago, I saw something that really stuck with me. Let me start off by saying that it was evening, but dusk. The street lights had just come on, but it was not completely dark outside yet. I could still see everything regular with color and details, and it wasn't too dark. So anyway, this is my regular route I take home. I took my exit. I turned on the next street, about 10 minutes from home after driving for over an hour, and I saw what I thought was a man walking on the side of the road. I thought it was just some guy walking at first. But as I got a little closer, I got this overwhelming feeling that he wanted me to stop. He wanted to come with me. It was very strange. I have never had this kind of feeling before. It was like I could feel his intentions without even talking to him. And it also felt dark. There was a pulling feeling that came from him. I just knew he wanted me to stop, and he wanted to come with me. And I knew he didn't have good intentions. He was walking on the same side of the road I was driving. But as I got closer, I noticed it wasn't a man. He had the form of a man but was completely black. When I say he was black, I'm not talking about the color of the skin. All of his clothes were black. He was wearing pants and a long-sleeve hoodie that was up around his head, but there was no form, wrinkle, or detail to any of the clothes. I can't remember any type of shoe. I slowed down briefly to take a look at him when I'm a little closer due to the feelings, and I can see now that he is blacker than black. Like as black as a void. Like no color. I got even closer as I was looking at him, and he looked up and looked over at me. Then I noticed his face was completely black too. No face, just the form of a black, dark man with black where the face should be too. Like the blackest black, like when you were in a pitch black, dark room. It was just the shape of a man with a hoodie on with no details, completely void, and dark black. He turned and looked at me as I slowed down a bit. That's when I saw his face. Or rather, lack of face? It was completely black, just like the rest of him. No details or anything. It was exactly like the shadow man I read described and have seen in the ghost video clips on YouTube. It shook me, and I'm still thinking about it a few days later. He just had a feeling that stuck with me. I could tell he wanted to come with me, or someone. He wanted me to stop. I did not stop. Once I saw the black void face that matched the rest of him, I sped up a bit. And I'm glad I did not stop. When I looked in the rearview mirror, he was still walking down the street, and I could feel him staring at me. That was the first encounter I've had with a shadow person. It was just in a place where I would never expect to see that kind of thing. This happened to my brothers over 15 years ago. At the time, we were going through a very hard time financially, so my brothers and their wives lived with us in a single wide trailer outside of town. The trailer was parked next to the owner's home. We lived 15 minutes away from civilization, and the area we lived in, I found out, has a history of paranormal activity. From where we lived, there was a highway known to have a woman appear in the backseat of commuters, disappear, and so on. To get to our home, you have to get off the main road and drive on a dirt road. We had neighbors that lived along the road, and we all knew each other. Since we lived at the end of the road, we saw who came in and who went out. My two older brothers had gone in separate cars into town and returned home like 1 minute apart from each other. My first brother saw an older lady dressed in black lace from head to toe walking down the road. My father describes that her skin was so pale that it looked transparent, and he thought nothing of it. A minute later, my oldest brother is driving down the road and sees the same old lady, but something tells him to look back. As he looked into his rearview mirror, he saw that lady had no feet. She was heading toward the property we lived on. He freaks out and rushes home. Yelling at my mother, he says that the lady has no feet, and the other brother confirms he saw the same lady. My mother grew up in Mexico with all its superstition. She said it was La Muerte and that it was death. She runs out to greet death, but she is nowhere to be seen. There was no way it was a person because the road we lived on was a long one. We would have been able to see a car come in or go out. It turns out the owner's husband was fighting for his life that day and thought he would not make it through the night. He was an older man reaching his end of days, but by the grace of God when you're a teenager. But right before that road, I had to take 2 very close turns to get onto it. First, I'd take a right turn that was more than 90 degrees, almost back the way I had come, and then, in exactly half a mile, I would turn left onto the long, straight road where I could really put the gas pedal down. Since it was only half a mile, I normally didn't speed up that much because the small stretch of road was more like packed gravel, and it would be a waste as I would have to slow down again to turn left onto the much better road where I could let loose. The tiny property on the inside corner of the left turn is where all this went down. A house had recently been built there, 2 stories with a detached garage, and it seemed odd how quickly it had been erected as we built our family house and it took us a year to finish it. I will start at the beginning because I believe this is all related. Week 1. I am positively jamming to my music, the wind whipping through my car feels great, and I'm relaxed in my very familiar drive home. I slow down to make my right turn onto the rough rural road, just bebopping along when my lights illuminate something stunning sitting on the corner of the road. It's a wolf, a real wolf, a solid white real wolf. I know the difference between my dog breed and a wolf. I love watching dog competitions and wildlife documentaries and have even met a 1/4 wolf in person. They look different from domestic dogs. This was a wolf, and it was amazing, blowing my mind. I slow down even more while I turn down my music. I'm getting close to it, and I notice that it's not minding me at all. It is sitting perfectly still on the corner of the road, staring at the house. Almost unblinking, its ears didn't even flick towards me. All its attention was focused on this house. I was so close I could have reached out my window and brushed the fur on the back of its head. I was smiling and amazed, but my mind was already churning. It made no sense for a wolf to be behaving like that, even less for there to be a white wolf in rural North Alabama in the summer. I came to a complete stop behind it, marveling at its fur and presence. I felt euphoric, like I had seen something rare and blessed. My mind made a jump to the local Indian stories of animal spirit guardians, and I started to wonder. I couldn't stay though. Mom would never believe me if I told her I was late because of a spirit wolf. With a sigh, I said goodbye to the wolf and drove home in a better mood than ever. I got to see something special, and it filled me with emotions of joy and peace. Week 2. I was driving home again, and I had been taking extra care to keep an eye out for my wolfy buddy, hoping to see him again around that area, so I drove extra slowly with my window down and radio off. That was a horrible mistake. I should have realized what the presence of a guardian meant. It meant danger. Alas, I was on the short road approaching the new little house. Then I saw the thing that, to this very day, makes me question my sanity, my reality, and the possibility of eldritch terrors, as Lovecraft described. It was crouched right before their mailbox, its limbs were folded and pulled in tight with its hunched posture, yet its head was still taller than the box. It was mottled green and black with undertones of blue, and it looked wet and slimy all over. Its head was elongated, allowing for an extended maw full of razor-sharp teeth. The upper half of its body looked emaciated, with barely more than frog-like thin skin pulled over angular long bones, ropey muscles to hold it upright, and at the end of its grossly stretched arms were equally terrible long fingers. While its legs had bulk to them and looked equipped for running, with back-facing knees for sprinting, and tipped in raptor-like curved claws, it looked tall, maybe 7 feet or more, just folded up into this predator's posture, waiting for prey. Then there were its eyes, solid black and sunken. I still want to vomit thinking about its eyes looking at me. Then I realized. It's going to look at me, it's going to see me, and there is no avoiding it. Panic and terror unique to this alien thing swallowed me instantly, feeling like I was tilting off the world I had always known and into an abyss where monsters like this exist. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get my window up. I had to get my window up, or I would be ripped by those teeth and torn with those claws. Blood would adorn the cabin of my car, and I would become an unsolved mystery. I had a manual crank window. Fuck me, I had a crank window because I was scared of crashing into water and not being able to get out of my car, but now I realize that there are far worse things in the world than crashing into water. Its head was turning towards me, and I had let off the gas, but I was still getting closer to it. It made me want to scream, but I had to get my window up first, and I was cranking it as hard as I could. I was starting to cry as I finally got the window closed, and then I put my gas pedal to the floor. Gravel road, be damned. I thought I must not look at it as I pass, I must not look at it or make direct eye contact, I just shouldn't. It's not good to connect with these things, I've already seen too much. My tires had found grip, and I started to launch forward, passing it. In my peripheral vision, I could see it starting to unfold its limbs, and it sent a terrible chill down my spine. I'm screwed, I'm really screwed, FCK, FCK, FCK. I was mumbling through my tears as I slid around the turn, fishtailing for a moment before I rocketed down the road. I felt sick, my heart was hammering, I had snot and tears rolling down my face, and my hands were shaking. I glanced in my rearview mirror and could only see darkness as there were no street lamps out there. I used a trick I've mentioned in one of my other stories to tap my brakes soft enough that the light comes on, but I don't actually slow down. Red lit up the dust that was billowing up in my wake, but amidst the swirling chaos, I thought I saw a darker shadow than the rest, a tall, thin shadow. I had enough and decided I was going to drive straight to the lighted roads and not let off the gas again the rest of the way. No more looking back, I was going to drive at 109 miles per hour, which is as fast as I can go before my governor kicks in. I even ran a stop sign at the end of the road because I was not going to get caught by this thing if I could help it. I took a right onto the highway and flew home. I might have even been relieved to get pulled over, but I did not. When I got home, no one was awake. I was pretty trusted to come home on time, so I called my boyfriend and cried to him for a long time before I was able to explain. He was dismissive and thought I was pulling a joke on him, then he thought I was just being crazy and seeing things. There are many reasons we didn't stay together, but his insensitivity contributed. Week 3. I refused to take my shortcut anymore. For that reason, I would have to leave my boyfriend's house a bit early, and he'd been making fun of me about it all week. One of the days we went to a park to walk around, and on the way back, he decided he wanted to drive by the house where I saw that thing. I was hysterical, begging him not to drive there, but he would not be dissuaded, so as we got closer and I could not stop him, I leaned my passenger side seat all the way back and pulled myself down, cowering in panic about getting near the place. I hid below the window and covered my eyes while panting heavily, reliving the traumatic night in my mind again. At one point, he stopped the car. "Spooky, you have to see this," he said. "No," I whined, resisting his pulling at my arm. "No, you really have to see this. Look," he said it in a tone of astonishment. Tears in my eyes, I uncurled and slowly peeked over the rim of the window. The house was gone, burned clear down to the foundation, with only a handful of framing beams still standing. The ground around the house was blackened in a perfect, large circle. My boyfriend started to get out of the car. I shouted, "No, let's get out of here," while I grabbed for his arm, but he easily avoided me and got out. He walked around the ashy piles of the ruins for a bit, using a stick to poke at this and that. When he finally came back, he had an intense look of thought on his face. There was no evidence of any personal belongings, furniture, power wiring, or even interior walls. "It doesn't seem like other burned out houses, something's weird." When we got to his house, he searched for news articles about any house fires in the area. There weren't any. He called the closest fire station and was quickly brushed off by the person who answered, as they didn't know about a fire there and didn't have time to find out before quickly hanging up on him. I never wanted to see that place again. I went out of my way to avoid the roads in that area. Talking about it still makes my chest tighten, my skin crawl, and my eyes water. My brain still has trouble because I know I saw it, a thing that is nothing like any creature known to humans, yet still I saw it. If you've heard of something that matches its description, let me know.